Fred Fox Jr., Stephen Langford. First of all, is it Fred Fox Jr. or just Fred Fox?
I get Junior because my dad was a writer and all that kind of stuff. So I guess we can go Junior.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, you guys are, you were in it. I mean, writing and producing, you did a lot of that for Family Matters, which is the show that myself and my co-host Andrew, who could not be with us today,
That's too bad.
Yeah. But yeah, he sends his love. I mean, he knows that this is going to be a terrific conversation. He could have, he wish he could have been here. But yeah, no, for the past couple of years, we've been just diving into everything that is our favorite childhood television show, Family Matters. And once we saw your name on the credits and what you guys contributed to this show, we were really just hoping to speak to you. So to be able to have that opportunity right now is just so amazing. So
Well, thank you
much
for
this.
having us.
Hey, thank you.
Forward to this.
Yeah. So let's just start from the beginning, if you guys don't mind. Can you each tell me how television came into your life? Like, what first made you want to say, okay, I got to write, I got to produce for television?
Steve, why don't you start it off?
Well, I was a teenager, and the TV series Star Trek came out, and there was a book called The Making of Star Trek, which I read, and I saw the outline for the pilot for Star Trek was like 15 pages, and I said to myself, I could do that. And I was like sort of, and then I
Wow.
was, as a teenager, I was just writing 120-page screenplays and things like that. Of course, my parents were like, didn't know what to think. It's like 15, 16. I started making these, little films and things, and I was all into that whole thing. And then I went to Emerson College, and which had a ridiculous amount of talent that was there. I mean, there's like a list of famous actors, writers, Oscar-winning people that came out of school, and met some friends, and they ended up working on Different Strokes. And then when there was an opening on Silver Spoons, this kind of obscure show, right? I got a job as an assistant, and eventually became a writer on the show.
Well, excellent. I'm kind of like the antithesis of Steve. It's so cool. Steve knew what he wanted to do, and he was writing screenplays. As I mentioned earlier, my father was a writer. Bob Hope, George Burns, Jackie Gleason, Lucy. And growing up, I thought it was so cool. Dad was a writer. Never entered my mind that I would do it. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, went to San Diego State. My first big job was I was at Hertz Truck Rental. I was behind the desk. Then I was an executive. And then in 1974, I took a comedy writing class at UCLA Extension. There's a gentleman there that worked for an advertising agency, and we kind of hit it off. We wrote a spec, All in the Family. My father's agent submitted it to the producers. Didn't hear anything for a while. We got a letter from the producers saying, you guys are very funny. The guy I wrote it with was Gary Shandling, who was amazing.
Oh, my God.
Amazing guy.
Wow.
And then in New Year's Eve, 1975, I got a call from Cindy Williams, my high school classmate. She said, I'm doing this show called Laverne and Shirley. It could be canceled right away, but if you want to be my gopher, basically. And then when we leave from the day, I could go to the writer's room. She got me a meeting with Gary Marshall. I walked in, and he said, oh, so you're Freddie Fox as a kid. And when Gary Marshall and Jerry Belson came out from New York to be writers, one of the first shows they were on was the Joey Bishop show. And Gary said Dad was very helpful and encouraging. And then Gary said, now I know you want to write. I almost went, really? But he said, right now, if Cindy needs her dry cleaning picked up or a car wash, we just would like her to concentrate on the show. And I said, that's fabulous. There was a great car wash. So we're going to do an episode where Ron Howard and Anson Williams guest starred, and I wrote the episode. So I ended up on Happy Days. So I was extremely lucky.
Oh my God. Well, follow-up questions for each of you on your start. So Steven, can you I'm wondering how you met, how you were friendly with people that happened to work on Different Strokes. So these are people that were like fellow Emerson college students?
college classmates.
Okay. And how did I mean, did they get the job much in the same way that you get a show business job? They just knew the right person and they got connected there?
I think, see, the thing with Emerson College was they had a LA program. So the LA program put students out here in LA. And now it's like there's a whole building. Um, there's a whole Emerson building, I think, on Sunset, I think. And, but so I had friends that got connected from this. And because they got connected, they got on shows. So they were on shows before I was. And then when I graduated, they got me an interview for a show. And that was it.
Can you talk about your experience working on Different Strokes, that being your first big
No,
break?
no Silver Spoons. They were on different strokes.
Oh,
Let me explain. Embassy Television was doing 6 or 7 different shows, and where we were in bungalows at Universal, right? Like little bungalows, and where Amlin is now. That's where I worked.
mm,
And so it was sort of like, yeah, I was on Silver Spoons, but Different Strokes was across the walk, across the side. It's like it's right over there. I just walk
right,
over there. In fact,
right.
Fact of Life is to my right, and Jefferson's is to my left. Like literally,
Yeah.
it's just you are in a sea of shows.
Wow. And yeah, so first gig on Silver Spoons. What was that experience like? What did you learn? What failures did you have to go through to become the success that you are now? Like, tell me what that first experience in the business was like.
Well, the first experience, well, I did leave out. I did leave out one thing.
Oh,
When I was in college, I PA'd on major movies. See, what I
that's your
did
assistant.
was I was in high school and they gave you had to do 2 internships. And I was sitting there looking at a list of internships and then I thought of, wait a minute, there's a film bureau, the Massachusetts Film Bureau. I'll ask my, you know, teacher if I can get one there. And they got me one there because that's the way I thought was, oh, if I'm at a film bureau, then I can be on set. If I'm being set, I can get a job in a movie. And that's exactly what happened. I
Hmm.
did a I was like, I was 18 years old, uh, working on Oliver's Story, the sequel to Love Story.
Hmm.
And the first job I had was uh, Ryan O'Neal had to drive his car down to hit the mark. And I'm with a radio down at the mark where he has to stop. Again, 18 years old. The car comes down. They yell cut. I tell Ryan cut. Then Ryan O'Neal says, want me to drive you back up? And I'm like, driving back up with Ryan O'Neal, who at the time was a very, very big movie star. And I'm like, where the fuck where am I? What the heck is going on? What did I get myself into? And then I worked on The Verdict with Paul Newman, Sid Lumet, and Starting Over, and Hanky Panky with Gene Wilder, who was a very, very nice guy.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was my college experience. So when I came out to LA, I had the best resume of anybody. So that's why I got the job on Silver Spoons. I had done so
Wow.
many films. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And Fred, I mean, you mentioning that your father, Fred Sr., already had his experience in the business and was working with the likes of Lucille Ball. Can you tell me what that experience was like being, amongst those big names as a kid growing up, trying to figure out your way into the business? Was it intimidating? Was it fascinating? Like, tell me what that was like.
Yeah, no, I thought it was fascinating. Dad was a very, very funny man. He wasn't a joke teller per se. He was just naturally funny. All my high school friends would want to come over and to see me, but I think a lot of it was to see see Dad and have fun. When I have a twin sister, once I would go to the filmings. I remember went to a Sonny and Cher taping. Jerry Lewis. In fact, Jerry Lewis, I think we're 16 at the time, and I think Jerry Lewis's son asked my sister out on a date.
Okay.
She, for some reason, maybe she was seeing someone, but didn't go out with him, and he couldn't
Prob-
understand why she wouldn't go out with him. We have a
Probably
bowling alley in our house.
a good idea.
Yeah. So, as I said, and I mean, in high school, I was class comedian, all that kind of stuff, and then at UC Santa Barbara, I took one acting class, and which was fun, but just still never thought I guess I worked when I was going to UC Santa Barbara. I worked as a stagehand, and Dad got me kind of a stagehand job at the studios. So I would either get a prop call, a grip call, or a lecture call. I was always feared I'd get a lecture call because I had no idea what I would be doing. I worked the Anne Margaret special. She was, I think I had a grip call that day, and she was singing Respect. And after the rehearsal, we'd have to move some stuff. After one, she kind of was, pointed towards me to like come see her. And I turned around like 10 times. She finally said, "No, you." And I walked up and she said, "Oh, excuse me, but you have a very nice face. Can I look at you when I'm singing?" And after I fainted and got up, I said, "Of course." But just, the experience was amazing. And then finally, I worked on a game show called The Girl in My Life. Fred Holiday was the host, and I was in the audience department, which was very important because the premise of the show was you would bring a woman would bring her girlfriend to the show and say, "Oh, this will be fun," and she would be honored for doing nice things for people. So that was my first real experience. But yeah, again, growing up, I thought it was so great. Dad, was a writer, and we never even talked about it. If I would be in it. I mean, looking back, obviously, I wish I had said, "Hey, Dad, looks like a lot of fun. Can you get me a meeting?" But I just was. If Cindy Williams hadn't called, I don't know what I would have ended up doing. So again, extremely, extremely lucky.
You mentioned working in the audience department. What does that mean? What is
Oh,
that?
we had, since we surprised the woman in the audience, we had to have the audience, get an audience to come to each show. So we would call fraternities, sororities, senior homes, and we would bus them in to see the show. So it was an interesting show because we shot on Friday and we'd have the audience all set, and then we get a call Friday morning and say, "Oh, Mr. Fox, I'm sorry, our 50 people can't come." So then we scramble to get more people. So it's kind of a
Wow.
high pressure job, but it was, a very good experience. And even, working at Hertz Truck Rental, I remember James Mitchell didn't start writing until he was like 40, and he said that, everything he did help him become a writer, and the experiences, which I think is very true. Some of the experiences we all have, before we get in the business.
So when you're like writing and producing something like Family Matters, and you come in with that audience department experience, is that something that's, I don't know, is that something that's helpful to when you are just focusing on writing and producing
Yeah, I
a
think. Yeah, I
sitcom?
think it really is, and I'm glad I started out as a basically a gopher to Cindy Williams, because I think when you start at the bottom per se, you really realize, first of all, how lucky we are to be in this business, and there's, I think, a lot of talented people that never get the break. So when I got in, and then since Dad was a very successful writer, but there were times he was out of work, so I knew just how so lucky I was to start on Laverne and Shirley, and then Happy Days for got 7 years, and Family Matters for 8, and I certainly have done shows that were canceled after 13, but again, just seeing what Dad went through. I remember as a little kid, one of my favorite shows was Superman. I'd be all excited, and Dad would come home and say, "Oh, Dad, let's watch Superman," and he'd go, "Oh boy, great!" And then I'm sure Steve can understand this too. And all of a sudden, he'd kind of like disappear, and I'd walk in, and he was on his roll typewriter, typing away. And it didn't really bother me because I knew, fortunately, how hard the business is and how many hours you had to work. But yeah, it was when I finally got in. I just, again, loved every moment. And Steve would agree. Just our, writing tables at Family Matters.
God, oh my
So
God.
much fun. And then how I got on Family Matters. I worked with Michael Warren and Bill Bickley on Happy Days.
Yeah.
And a gentleman named Brian Vent and I created a show called My Secret Identity, and Jerry O'Connell and Derek McGrath were the leads. And Brian stayed here to run the new Leave It to Beaver, and then I went to Toronto to shoot My Secret Identity. When that ended, I went back to New Leave It to Beaver, started shooting in Orlando, and then I came back here, and I thought, gosh, I hope I get on a show. And then I got a call from Michael Warren saying, "Hey, we're doing a show, Family Matters." Steve and I came out in the second season.
Uh-huh.
And he said, we hired Dave Duklan to be a showrunner. And as Steve and I will tell you later, just an incredible, great, talented showrunner in person. So that's how I got on Family Matters.
How did you get on Family Matters, Steve?
Well, because I had worked on Jim Gagan was one of the producers. He was on Silver Spoons, and what happened was it's a few steps, but what happened was is that I that Jim noticed me first. He mentored me, and when Norman Lear sold the company to Sony, we were going to get what do you call a bonus check. Now, a bonus check was usually a week's salary, which was about $350, right? So I'm like, okay, so it's toward Christmas time. I work for, mind you, the only person I didn't like was my first boss. Was a really terrible guy.
Oh, no, what happened?
Oh, that's a whole podcast in itself. But I could get you a bunch of people to do a Steve Prisker podcast, because he was so notorious. But
I'd be interested.
so anyway, so Jim mentors me, and there's some tragedy happens to one of the writers on Silver Spoons, and I come on in mid-season and staff. So I've left as an assistant maybe a year and a half ago and come back as a writer.
Mhm.
And it was like all the assistants were hanging their heads out the window, cheering me on. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this shit. Couldn't believe it. But then, so I worked there, and then Dave Duklan did Boys We Boys, and then Jim was on that show too, and he said, let's bring Steve on. So then I knew Dave from the first season of Silver Spoons as an assistant,
Mhm.
but not as a writer. And then when he saw what I could do on Boys Will Be Boys with Matthew Perry, then I had his eye. So when he got Family Matters, I was one of the first calls. I was like, that year, I had interviews for the Cosby Show and Family Matters.
Really?
Yeah, I went to New York. Thank God. In
Wait.
hindsight,
Well, no. I mean, and yeah, in hindsight, obviously, given all the stuff with Bill Cosby, but at the time, I believe the Cosby Show was still the #1 show on
oh
television.
yeah, it was a big show. It
Yeah.
was a big show,
Yes.
but it was sort of like, but I think it'd be safe to say that the writers of Family Matters make more residuals than the writers of the Cosby Show right now. I mean,
Now, why was that? Did Bill just have something set up where the writers would not get as much as they were worth? Like,
no,
what's?
because of the incident, the value of the show went down.
Oh, I see what
The
you're saying. Oh,
financial
yeah,
value of the show went down.
yeah,
Family Matters has got to be on, like, I don't know, a BET plus about 3 or 4 other places.
right.
It's an evergreen, and an evergreen is a thing I learned when I was first as a pup writer. They said, the older writer said, what you want to be an evergreen show, the show that keeps paying. And I go,
Right.
okay. And I'm like, well, it turns out, yeah, I was on one of those. Family Matters is
Yeah.
one of those that just keeps, it's still generating. So it's an important piece of Warner Brothers earnings.
Yeah, it is. Oh, just to add a Jim Gagan story. I had never met Jim, and then when the first day he came on the show, I hear this gentleman on a bullhorn saying something like, "Hey, everybody, I'm here! I'm here!" I'm going, "Who is this guy?" And a great guy, talented, funny, brought a lot of scripts together. I mean, Steve's known him for years, and just quite a character.
Wow. So let me just see if I have this right, Steve. Were you officially offered a job at Cosby and went to Family Matters instead? Is that how that went? Or
I had literally within a week, I had an interview with Cosby, and I had a job offer from Family Matters. And I was just it was the kind of thing where the offer came in, and no offer came in from the Cosby Show.
I see.
And this was my second. This was my second dance with Cosby. And I was like going, you know what? I'm not going to uproot anything. This show is going to be on for years.
Really?
And I just knew, like I'm going, because I knew the ratings from the first season. I'm going, this is the show that stays on for a long time. And I just said, I felt relieved, but it was also working with Dave, who was great. So, because the reality is, what happened was that we did season 2, and these 2 other writers left or were fired. I don't know what the story was, but then I told Dave, Jim Gagan, hire Jim Gagan, because that was his friend too. So Jim started the 3rd season, and We had a good time. We had a very, I mean, the writers room, we had a lot,
Yeah,
pretty good time.
great group.
Sorry, so you're saying the ratings for season 1 of Family Matters you saw were great, and you thought going into second season that
Well,
this
they
was a
were
show to stick around?
actually. It's interesting. The ratings weren't very good. In fact,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
the infamous I think Jaleel first appeared in episode 12 of the first season, and just turned
Yeah.
it around.
Well, we knew there was something blowing up over there with him. So it
I
was like,
see.
yeah, you're going, there's something blowing
Yeah.
up over here, and you want to be at a place where something's blowing up.
Okay.
So that was,
That,
that's what we did.
that makes sense. Yeah. So you were talking about the momentum from episode 12
Oh
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
end of the
Yeah.
first season. Okay,
Right.
okay. I thought you meant like before Jaleel came on. I was confused for a second. Okay. All right. So and that's interesting that you say that, Steve, because you know, I mean, someone like me might think, oh, you stick with or you hinder on the show that is bigger at the time, which was Cosby. You try to get a job there, but it sounds like you were thinking more long term. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this show's going to be hot. This show's going to be on for a long time. This show's going to pay me residuals that will make it worth it. So I didn't think about it that way.
And also it's like I'm going, I know my boss.
Right.
I know my boss is, I know what he's like. And it's like I've worked with before, and so I ended up doing, not only Family Matters with him, but I did Malcolm and Eddie with him too. So, but yeah, it was just one of these things where I just sort of, I've been Cosby, like they flirted with me several times, and it was just sort of like it was getting, I don't know what kind of environment that was. I do know after I left Silver Spoon as an assistant, I didn't work with a mean person after that for my whole career. Everybody was nice. Everybody was kind. Everybody was supportive. And I can tell you other writers do not have that same experience. But I had it was just like everyone was great.
You hear horror stories, and same as Steve. I had one in my very lucky career. I only had one bad experience with the showrunners.
What was it?
Yeah, I'd rather not say. It was on a show called Webster, but there are some very very good, really good producers, and but there were two that weren't so
I would
nice.
say I didn't. I mean, I wrote one Webster,
Yeah, I
but
was going to ask about that. Yeah.
but I know he's talking about, and they were notorious all across town. It's like that was everyone knew. Everybody knew. They were just like they were notorious. I don't know what they did, but they were notorious.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it's again, remember there was only 100 shows back then, so it was a very small group of writers and people. If you were, it's like if you were a jerk, you know, you'd hear about it.
Yeah, it got
Yeah.
around.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Um,
Actually, the guy had worked for on Silver Spoons. The bad guy had gone to Valerie's family, and he got fired from there.
Valerie, I'm sorry, Valerie who?
Valerie Harper's show.
Harper
Oh, yeah,
show.
okay.
He got fired from there, and we all knew right away. But we also then someone said somebody had gone to his parking space, taken a Sharpie, and written "asshole" all over his name.
Oh, that'll do it.
This is the kind of
There's still some ink on Steve's hands.
yeah, there was. So the guy who fired him, this guy named Chip Keys, good, nice guy.
Yeah.
And I said, Chip, I gotta have lunch with you. You gotta tell me about that day. I'll pay for lunch. And he did give me a breakdown of the whole day, and it was like drinking a fine wine because really the only person that was mean to me, the only person,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's because I realized after a while, I'm like most people are really nice. What is this guy's deal? It's like you're going
just a verbally and emotionally abusive person. That was the lay of the land.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
Wow.
And Steve and I have said to one another, so lucky to be in this business, and there's no reason for people to be, mean and yell at people. It's fortunately said, it only happened on one occasion.
I was like, this one day I was working on a film called Hanky Panky, and the AD told me take Gene Wilder over to get some stamps. We're in the in Cambridge by Harvard. So we walk to the post office, and I'm like going, this guy, I'm with the big star. It's this Gene Wilder. This is like just like this
Yeah.
young Frankenstein, just not that far away from that. It's a big
Absolutely.
deal. So we're walking through Cambridge, and I'm looking around, going, no one's noticing him. And I walk in the post office. Gene says, I'd like some stamps. The postmaster doesn't recognize him at all. Hands him the stamps. He pays. We walk out.
Huh.
And I'm sitting here going, I was nervous. I'm like, I got to take care of this millionaire actor star. I'm like going,
Right.
oh, that was easy. That was nothing. That was
Huh.
great. Now, Sidney Poitier was directing the movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the AD said to me, we changed locations, Central Square, and he said, just could you walk Sidney to his car? And Central Square was where most African Americans lived in Cambridge, were in that area. And so we walk up to the car. I reach for the door handle. It's locked.
Hmm.
The Teamster's going off somewhere. We don't know where he is.
Mhm.
Sidney and I turn around, and we see a sea of people coming toward us. That's him. I go through this thing with Gene Wilder. This is cake. No, no. I'm like going, oh my God. Now I'm going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I didn't have to do anything. Sidney Poitier's been in this situation many a time, obviously. He just put on the Sidney Poitier smile, and I kid you not, people step back. They just step back because he's an icon. Like Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe. He was an iconic, and I gotta say, probably the only iconic person I've really ever been with.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, but that was the thing. Was like they stepped back. He just smiled at them. The Teamster walked up. Off we went.
Huh.
All the same day. It was all the same day.
The show I did in Toronto, My Secret Identity, we won an international film award. The only reason I mentioned it is Audrey Hepburn presented. And she was, as you can imagine, just the nicest, and just a great slow dancer. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Well, that is the funny thing is that Fred and I have met. I mean, when someone posts on Facebook, tell me all the famous people you met. People are met with shock when I put it down because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Fred and I, it's ridiculous what we met. I mean, I've had Donna Summer singing right next to me, and that's unreal. Same thing with Pavarotti. I hit a private concert with him on a film.
Yeah.
Things like stuff that most people will never ever, it's like it just not. That's not like you're trying for this to happen. It just happened.
And I met Gregory Peck once. To Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite movie. I was at a restaurant, a hot restaurant at the time, and I was dating this young lady, and all of a sudden she just like stopped dating and was transfixed. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she just kind of pointed. I turned around. It was Gregory Peck and his wife having dinner with another couple. And I look at the couple, and a gentleman I went to grammar school with named Robert Finkelstein, who's an entertainment lawyer, handles the Sinatra estate and Groucho Marx. So I went over, and if Gregory Peck had been a bad guy, I would have been the nicest person in the world.
Yeah, he's supposed to be really very, very nice.
Oh my God. Were there any special guest stars on Family Matters that you guys met that kind of blew you away in the same aspect?
Oh,
Different levels of things, they're all different levels of things. Like I said, I was a Star Trek fan, and I ended up casting, I don't know if you remember this episode where there was a bulbous head aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the head alien. And I was casting her in my show, and we're going, okay, that's crazy. This is something that was like, out of my childhood. And she's here, she's acting. I'm like going, so there's things like that. And just, I think the thing that and Fred will probably agree, we got to cast some great comedy veterans like Tom Poston. We were so lucky to have him.
Can you talk about the episode that he was in and what we may know him from?
Oh, Tom Poston was on the Newhart Show.
Oh, okay.
And he was a comic legend. And I believe he played Mr. Lunay. Was one of Steve's teachers.
High school. He worked in the high school, wasn't he?
Yeah. Mr. Lunay.
Janitor, maybe, something like that. But just
But the guy was like, it's a joy because you know how to write for him, and he's going to give you 100% more than what you wrote.
I love that.
And Fred
Fred Willard.
Oh my God. Fred Willard,
he's great.
Another legend.
So funny.
Oh
my God.
But then we did. It's like we would sometimes we'd be sitting there. The producer would be sitting going, well, I got to cast a show. When they're going, Sheila, we're making off. If we have to cast, we have to get in the golf cart and drive all the way across Warner Brothers, right? In the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And do the casting, which is fine. But sometimes you're going, hey, can we just make an offer on somebody, not go down there? And we did that. We had people that we liked. You're going, and they were willing to come in for,
Yeah.
X amount of dollars.
Right. And also, we did a kind of a serious show called Finding the Words where,
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Paul
Yeah.
Winfield was the guest
Paul
star.
Winfield, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that episode and I was stunned we got Paul Winfield. And Steve, I thought it incredible. But like Steve said, you never know what you do. You make an offer.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit shocking. You know, we did that. You can make that offer and they show up and they're there, and you're going, wow, this is just crazy. But then now, in the course of us taking casting, we get in the golf cart, and oh my God, who you'd see just driving the golf cart, just like what was the thing? Did you offer a ride to a movie star?
Oh, God,
What?
good memory. We were, Jim Gay and I were going to casting on a golf cart, as Steve said, and we're walking. We see a young lady on the lot. So we stopped the car and said, would you like a ride? And she said, oh, that's so nice of you. So I get in the back of the golf cart. She gets in the front. Jim floors it. I go flying off the golf court. And so then I get back on and, one of us said, "Oh, what brings you to Warner Brothers?" And she goes, "Oh, well, I'm here to see a star." And she didn't say who it was, but it was very interesting.
My God. Can you do you guys mind breaking down how each of you like write a script? That's the in looking at all the episodes that you've done with Family Matters, that was just a key thing that came to mind was like how do they break down the story, the characters, the lines? Like I'm just interested in that kind of process. You can Steve, you can start.
Well, let's start with my favorite episode. My personal favorite is driving call crazy.
Yeah.
Learns how to drive. So that was really interesting in the process where we're in the conference room at Sony. And I said, Jaleel's turning 16. He's got to learn how to drive. And everyone sort of chuckles. And then we go, yeah, you're right. And then they go, but I said, Interstellars drove in one of the Pink Panther movies, a weird 3-wheel car. He kind of have a normal car. So all the guys were like scouring to find the right car. It was like this. Remember that friend? We were like a frenzy of trying to find the right stupid car.
Yeah. It was fun.
And someone found the BMW Isetta. And then in that process, then what happens is then, so we have the idea. And now the generally 8 of us, we sit on the table and we begin building the story.
Yeah.
And I think the B story was Carl with some blood pressure problems. I believe that's what it was.
Oh.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Dave Tuclon was the one who said, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. What the heck is bothering me? Right?
Yeah.
That was Dave. And because a funny thing about Dave was David wanted to be an actor. And that was kind of helpful because he knew how to act out a scene. Or if the actor didn't have it, he knew how to portray it so they could see, oh, that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we built up the story. Obviously, I'm taking notes. I go up and write an outline of that story. I get more notes, and then I'm sent off to teleplay for 2 weeks. Where I'm not in the writer's room. I'm allowed just to write the script. I don't have to come to the meetings or anything. And then when it's done, then in a way, the real work happens where all of us are pitching in jokes, adjustments, and it's like if your desire to be a writer is you want to have all your words, everything you've written, filmed, sitcoms are not the place for you. I learned that on What's Happening Now, my first solo credit, and I had written it. I pitched like 8 ideas, and they like 7. I was like a gunslinger. It was just crazy, and I just said. I walked in, Mike Milligan and Jay Moriarty. Mike just passed away, by the way, but walked in to set the stage for the taping, and they were excited to see me. They shook my hand. They said, "Hey, you did a great job. There's still 4 pages of your dialogue in the script." And it's a great thing to learn as a young writer. I'm like going, "Oh, okay. I'm part of the process, but not all of the process." And
I
also,
see.
it's like I'm getting it to a certain point so they can do what they do. And
Gotcha.
that's a great thing to learn starting off.
No, that is, yeah. If I can, I haven't heard of that. Because some scripts stay pretty much, but talking about stories and writing, so many times Steve and I are asked, how do you come up with your stories? Which is, a great question. Some it's, life experiences. Um, but there was one case where someone pitched, "Hey, why don't we do a camping show?" And a lot of people said, "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea." But I said, I've seen that so many times, so let's try to come up with a new way. I don't if you remember this, Steve.
Oh
So,
yes.
and I don't remember whose pitch it was, but it was a great idea. It's the episode. The story was they go camping. It's going to be Carl and Eddie, but of course, Steve comes along. Carl and Steve start kind of arguing, okay, where are we going to pitch the tent? Oh, somehow Steve wins. So in the middle of the night, all of a sudden, a water geyser just goes up, takes the tent. And the fact that we could do that on stage is just, some of the episodes we did were amazing, Steve, right? With the
Oh yeah.
special effects.
We really intentionally, now that we're shooting on 35 millimeter film, we try to make the show even more cinematic. We do a little bit extra. We do special effects you couldn't really imagine in the 90s, but we would do those things
Mm.
because we knew that added just a little touch, you know, um, making it a little more cinematic, just uh, trying to experiment with some things. So I think we did an episode where we did three love stories because we
Right.
realized that in that 22-minute format, structurally, we could mess around with things.
Yeah.
And now we'll do it all day long. But it was like not many
Yeah.
shows were trying to do that. But we did stuff like that where we'd say, "Hey, you ever do?" I can't remember the episode's name. It was like I think it was like three. It was like maybe a Valentine's show. It was like three
Right.
separate like vignettes that made up a whole half hour. So we were like did stuff like that, and I think we did.
Oh, also, Steve, we did Hot Rods to Heck, where we went on location and
Yes,
he souped up, as I said, and
has to be a
when it's just, yeah, looking back, some of the episodes we did were hard to believe we
Oh,
got
we
up.
went to Paris. Red got beat up, and
Yeah, yeah, we were the last night. I wasn't sure if we should tell this story, but we're in
Go ahead.
Paris. The last night, Rich Correll's directing that episode, so we thought, okay, let's take some of the crew out for dinner. So we
Mhm.
Planet Hollywood on the Champs Elysees. Rich and myself, and then uh, um, a friend of Rich's, a female, we're walking to get a taxi. All of a sudden, we see 5 or 6 guys coming toward us, probably in their 20s. A guy comes up to me and starts trying to get my wallet. And
Mhm.
just a natural reaction, I push him away. He starts hurting me, and 2 guys hold him back. 2 guys I didn't know came behind me, sucker punched me. All of a sudden, Rich Curl and I'm like 5'9", and Rich is my height. They're a little. All
Yeah.
of a sudden, there's 6 guys, and apparently, we're in a fight with 6 guys, which is
Oh my God.
the only thing I remember is slamming a guy into a car. He goes down, and then Rich. It happened so fast. I mean, we were so lucky they didn't have knives or gun. But the strangest thing to me is they ran off without getting anything, and it's like midgets fighting a behemoth. And
Right.
so about 5 minutes later, some of the crew comes out, big guys, and we go, "Hey guys, nice timing." So we go to the hospital.
Yeah.
I think broke his thumb and had a cut on my forehead and stuff. So I get back to the hotel. I'm wearing a white shirt. I take this
Yeah.
perfect imprint of a foot.
Oh wow.
It never went down, but it was just so people said, "Oh, I bet you hate going to Paris." I said, no, it could have happened here, but it turned out it was a 3-parter we shot, and Eiffel Tower, Paris Opera House. Amazing.
Yeah, Jaleel talked fondly about the Paris experience and
Yeah, it
his
was a
book that
great
recently came out.
lot
Oh my
of
God. Well, Fred, I actually noticed since we just wrapped up our season 2 podcast rewatch process, we noticed your writing credits on episodes like Boxcar Blues, Dog Day Halloween, Fast Eddie Winslow, High Hopes, Busted, Finding the
Wow.
Birds.
Well, you know your stuff. Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we dissect and talk about each episode. So with Boxcar Blues, like to me, it was a powerful indication of how strong Steve and Carl's dynamic would be throughout the duration of the series. In particular, there's a snort laugh symphony that they do on the boxcar that I found very hilarious.
Right.
Can you talk about if you had that sort of long-term dynamic between them in mind, and also like how was it choreographing, writing in that symphony? Like, just talk
Yeah,
about
well,
that.
you know, Steve said it's a team effort. You know, a lot of my stuff is there, and I don't remember who did the snort thing and stuff. But to answer your question, that was the first episode I wrote. It was so much fun. Yeah, I think that. I mean, it didn't, start the relationship, but I was so happy to be able to, write that episode. And again, it's a team thing, and everyone contributed. But it was, yeah, a lot of it was mine, and a lot
The
of
thing, the thing is, when you see Jaleel and Reggie performing as professionals, you know you've got it. You know it's
Right.
funny. You know that's like there. There's a sweet spot. This is always going to work. This is why I think of shows like Modern Family are just extraordinary, because you take every actor in that show and you combine them with any combination, they're all sweet spots.
Wow.
And that's why I said I call that show it's legendary. I don't think anyone could ever do a show as good as that again. But because the sweet spot's an important thing. See, the thing is, you put Waldo with anybody, it's fine.
Yeah. John Harrison.
My God, you put Waldo and Jaleel. I mean, it's crazy. Uh, you know, they're just Myra was a great combination.
Yeah.
With her, well, with Myra, Laura, and Steve. But those combinations, those are very, very important to writing a sitcom. And if you have one combination, you are sold.
And you guys had multiple. I mean, Eddie, Waldo, Eddie,
and also
Steve.
I was so lucky because to have just to write on a show like that and then have the act, it was like with Happy Days 2 and others that you just know they're going to just, kill it and just do.
It makes the job easier.
It does.
It does. That you go, because it's sort of like you're going, oh, if you're going, like I said, was driving Carl crazy, everyone knew, oh, Carl's got to teach Steve to drive. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's just funny. It's like, this is going to be really bad. I did one where it was it's just I was online and I saw on the decider.com that my Christmas episode of Family Matters was considered the best Christmas episode. And
was it?
This is the one I have my IMDb here. I can't remember the name of it.
I can't remember.
Was it the one from season 2, Have Yourself a Merry Winslow Christmas, or was a different episode?
I did Miracle on Elm Street, Jim and I, so it wasn't that one.
It wasn't that one.
Yeah.
But the point was in that, so I saw it was like a number one this list, and I'm like, okay. And Fred will tell you, it's like we are gobsmacked by the interest in the show after so much time.
Yeah.
It's surprising. So I decided to watch the episode, and the episode was about it's Christmas time. Jaleel and Reggie are on the the subway, and the train breaks down. And they're all bitter Chicagoans, angry about everything. And Jaleel tries to bring them Christmas cheer.
Yeah.
And it was just like sitting here going, this is the one the lady from Star Trek was on that episode. So I'm like looking at, one of the things is one of the things I've found sometimes is I look back at episodes and I go, wait a minute, I worked with this actor for years and he's in my favorite movie. I never talked to him about it.
Right.
I get mad at myself sometimes. I'm going, talk to him about it. Going, but you're so caught up in making the show, you just don't think about those things.
Yeah.
I did an episode called Sink or Swim where Steve's going to fail high school if he doesn't pass a swimming test. So Carl, teaches him, Eddie Mecca from Laverne and Shirley guest starred, and it was just, again, that was so much fun to see their, relationship.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so great. So, kind of jumping back to the Christmas episode of it all, I've always wondered when sitcoms have Christmas episodes, is that something where the writers are like, all right, it's Christmas time, let's come up with a Christmas episode, or is it more so like a TGIF ABC requirement that like, the whole night of shows are going to have a Christmas theme night? Like, you better have a Christmas episode for your show.
I think we just did it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah, but no, that's a very good question. Like, for example, did the network say, "Okay, guys, you have to do," and I think usually they did. They didn't say you have to do it, but I think they always
yeah.
expecting one. But
Well,
yeah, none of us ever said, "Oh shoot, do we have to do one?" But
but the thing is, and interesting, the way Tom and Bob set up the operation, we really didn't have to deal with the network much.
right,
Really?
We didn't have to deal with Warner Brothers that much. Warner Brothers figured out, oh, they know what they're doing. Leave them alone.
Huh.
yeah,
They did.
and I'm sorry, Michael Warren and Bill Bickley were very, they would deal with the network too. But yeah,
Yeah.
we were pretty much. We were concentrating on getting the shows out. So
Yeah. So it's like uh as today I know there's a lot of talk about executive interference and where we are in the business right now. But boy, on that show, it was just hands off. We just did the show.
boy,
That was it.
and that's very rare, obviously. And then it's even worse today.
And I'll add also that we would leave at 6:00 p.m. every night except film night. We'd be in at 10, out at 6.
Yes. And I know Rich Correll, having him on the podcast a while ago, he was talking about the contrast between you guys and say Friends, where like their rehearsals, like their rehearsal days will be fine. They probably will get out in the middle of the afternoon, but their tape nights were notorious for not letting out until like 2 in the
it'd be
morning.
hours and hours. Rich, Rich, a good friend, godfather to my daughter, and just amazing director. Gentleman, God, he directed, as you know, so many Family Matters.
Love
Yeah,
that.
David Duclon was the Clint Eastwood of showrunners.
Mm.
Yeah.
I remember we were filming a scene. We went to, it was like three cameras. We filmed the scene, and Dave said, "Moving on, the next scene." We looked at him like, "Dave, that was one take. We got it." He said, "We got it." And I'm like, and we're like, but what a lesson that was.
Right.
I learned that lesson when I worked in The Verdict. I'm like so excited because it's Sidney Lumet, who I'm a big fan of. It's Paul Newman, right? It's like this is it's a legendary film when they're making it. You just know.
Yeah.
And the first day we're filming up at the State House in Boston, and it's first scene, and he goes, "Take 1, take 2, take 3, turn the camera around, take 1, take 2, take 3."
Wow.
And this is an Oscar-nominated movie, and it was a real lesson of like going, this whole thing of taking a lot of takes and stuff is nonsense.
Yeah.
These actors are so good; they're getting it on the first take.
Yeah.
They're there.
Do you think when shows like Friends have long tape nights or take multiple takes or constantly rewrite jokes, do you think that's a reflection of, okay, like we're a really hot show and we really have to put ourselves to high standards, so we're just gonna beat this thing down to a pulp until we get the perfect joke? Do you think that's part of what is into it? Because you guys had a really hot show in Family Matters, and you guys could have had that same mindset, but somehow even with the hotness of the show, you were like, all right, let's just keep it moving. Let's just keep it moving. So I wonder.
Also, I think, go ahead, Steve.
I think it's the difference between having the confidence and lack of confidence.
Mm.
If you have the confidence to know this will be funny. I remember on a show, we had done a run through, and the show didn't seem that funny. And the showrunner said, "You've heard the joke 3 times. What's why you're not laughing?" And I'm like going, we're all nervous. We get to tape night. Audience comes in. They're laughing their asses off because he knew that the joke was funny, and a joke that's funny on Monday isn't something unfunny on Wednesday. It's unfunny because you've heard, the joke.
Yeah.
And you can't let that define your decision making. Because it's like you laughed the first time. Yeah. When they hear it first, they'll laugh too. So there's stuff like that. So I said confidence is a big reason. Confidence is why, you go home earlier. I mean, I remember one time Dave was so ahead of the game. He said we were like one of the Batman movies had come out, and we were working. Well, and he said, let's get some tickets. So let's go see a movie. And we bunked off and saw a movie. because
Wow.
we were that far ahead. That
But
he was he
there,
knew.
true. I mean, there were times we would spend quite a few minutes on getting a better joke, um, and then sometimes you go back go back to the thing you spent 20 minutes on. But that was rare. But I've been on other shows where you'll spend so much time on, uh, and the reason for that is it's you want you drive for perfection. You're not going to get it, but you want to do. We're hired to do the best job we can. If one has to stay late, it never bothered me. Sometimes it can be overdone. Like the Friends shooting night was frightening. We didn't have to experience that, but
And you guys were like practically right next door to them, right? When you moved
Yeah.
to Warner Brothers?
yeah, right, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
we were literally next door to Clint Eastwood. It was really
yeah.
right next to us.
And
And one day,
also, go ahead, Steve.
I'm gonna tell. Okay, we got two stories about this. I'm gonna tell my story, and you can tell your one about the mother. Okay, your mother.
Oh, right. Okay,
So
very good.
my story is like so. Fred, Gary, Mintier, and I, and maybe Jim, are standing on the at the one of the bungalows at Warner Brothers. Clint Eastwood leaves his office, El Paso, and he's walking like away from us. And Fred says, he's got a kind of a funny walk. And then I think Gary Mateer says, you want to go tell him?
See what happens.
That's so God. I fortunately don't recall that.
But then it was pretty, it was like, it was just like, you go, but he did have a funny walk. And it was like, you're like going, so you tell yours.
What? That's so. Now you said the mother. Which one's the mother one?
Oh, the mother one was like, okay, Clint had the best parking spot on the
Oh,
lot.
right. I got it. Right. Thanks.
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Dad was working at Universal, and for some reason, my mother went by to see him, and comes in, and Dad goes, "Oh, good to see you." For some reason, where did you park? And he goes, "Oh, I parked in Clint Eastwood's
Oh
space."
no.
Ooh, not a good idea. So he
Yeah.
goes up to
You fly out of your chair. You fly out of your chair.
yeah. And Clint Eastwood says something like, "Hey, you're parked in my spot." Dad says something, "Oh, Mr. Eastwood, yeah, I'm sorry, my wife parked." And as I tell me if this is how you recall, I think Clint Eastwood either bumped into the car, like the end of the car or something like that. But it was, yeah, a lesson not to do. And then one other story I think Steve remembers too. There's George Clooney's doing ER, and there's a basketball court,
Yeah.
right, as you know. And um, I knew George, not by name, but he saw me a lot. And one time we're walking to the run through, and George calls me over and goes, and he's holding this cute little puppy, and he goes, "Now you've got to get a puppy. All these girls flock to you." And I said, "George, give me the puppy. You don't need the puppy." It was so refreshing. A guy that would say,
Oh yeah,
"Women
Clooney,
flock to you like he needs a puppy."
George. So there was this Family Matters curse that every show that was put next to us on a soundstage would get canceled.
No.
And it went on for it went on for years. So then we moved to Warner Brothers, and ER was put next to us.
Okay.
And of course,
That's the
that was
exception.
that was the exception. But I remember walking on, and George Clooney was there, and he goes, "Hi, I'm George. I'm George." He says to me, and he's like, "I work an actor right now." I'm like, "I'm Steve Langford." So every day, whenever I got walked in, it's, "Hey George, hey Steve." We hang out, talk. The
Yeah.
guy, the amazing thing, and other people have said this before, is that he's a guy who went from being a working actor to a huge movie star. He
Yeah.
never changed.
True.
Never changed. Was the same nice guy.
Yeah.
I
He
love
was a
that.
guy grateful for what he has. It's like it's like,
His partner, Brent Heslop, did a couple acting jobs on Happy Days.
oh really?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, nicest guy. Just nicest guy.
Speaking of Happy Days, Fred Fox, you had talked about your experience on that show. Can you talk about, because we had Bill Bickley on recently on the podcast,
Oh,
talk
Bill's
about
great.
his
you're
experience.
great.
Talk about his experience with Gary Marshall and what Gary Marshall taught him. How about you? Like, what did you learn from Gary Marshall on your experience writing for Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that because I kind of wanted to bring it up. Gary's just an incredible mentor. I mean, he started, Logan's, blah, 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 so many people. And he was, Brian Levant and I just wrote a book called, believe it or not, it's been 50 years since Happy Days debuted.
Yeah.
wrote a book called 50 Years of Happy Days. And we talk about this stuff, but Gary was just so, he had a saying that family is more important than show business. He just started so many people's careers.
Dave Dupont,
Yeah, as Dave did.
Dave worked on Happy Days as well.
Laverne and Shirley.
Laverne and Shirley. Gotcha.
Right. But yeah, Gary, as we talk about in the book, it was just learned so much. Because, since Dad was a writer, I knew kind of the process. I mean, just this says a lot about Gary. When I left, when Sidney Williams went home, after rehearsal, I'd go to the writer's room, and at that time, the new person, when you're going over the script, if we're trying to get a funnier line, I couldn't just pitch it because I was like the new guy. So I would write the joke suggestion on a little piece of paper, hand it to a real writer. He or she would pitch it. If it bombed, they wouldn't turn around and say, "Oh, it's a stupid new guy." But if it got a huge laugh, they go, "Hey, that was Fred's." So after a while, I could just pitch. But what was interesting is I've heard stories that just brutal. Like one friend of mine started on a show and he pitched something and it didn't get a laugh. And one guy said, "Oh, that's terrible. How'd you get this job?" I mean, if that happened to me, I would have been devastated. But it was Gary was very in the book we talk when Brian started on the show. The way this is kind of off track, but the way Brian got on Happy Days is mind-boggling. Gary had a basketball game every Saturday, and all kinds of people would go. So a friend of Brian's invited him to the game. Brian guarded Gary and blocked some shots. And after the game, Gary said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm a writer. I've done some little, some things." And he goes, "Well, call Diane, my assistant." So Brian goes in and pitches, and that's how he got on the show. If he hadn't been playing basketball, and Brian, pardon me? So
That's what kind of things
some
happen that
people
way.
get their start, and then obviously Brian. I mean, when I was with Brian for so many years, you could just have a feeling he would go on to be an incredible director. I did the Flintstones movies and Jingle All the Way and many others. But I'm sorry, back to your question. I mean, Gary was just learned so much from him.
And I think it's Gary's
Michael and Bill on Family Matters, and it just kept. You keep learning. Which
I think the thing is Gary's hand, even though he wasn't doing Family Matters, it was over the show.
Yeah.
And he would show up sometimes. He'd come by, hold court. That was great. Because you were you sit there, because it's like and at one point we were on the same floor Step by Step, and Gary's sister was the producer of Step by Step.
Yeah, Ronnie
Allen. So we got to know them pretty well. But Gary was some kind of a genius. I mean, there was there's a documentary on Netflix about the making of Pretty Woman.
You directed it. Yep.
Yeah. The script that was written and what was shot are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also I believe that Gary Marshall had the movie in his head. And he was so brilliant that he had it in his head. So everyone wasn't sure what was doing. In fact, at one point, they went to Jeff Katzenberg and said, "We don't know if we got a movie here." And Katzenberg just hired an editor. They put together some scenes. It says it's fine. He just said he was so smart. He could come to the set and know what had to happen that day. He had the whole script in his head.
Yeah.
And when you say that Gary Marshall, like his identity, his sort of brand is all over the Family Matters, what do you mean by that? What exactly?
Well, Dave Duplan's first job was with him. So he mentored Dave. And I think a lot of the rules that Dave had were Gary Marshall's rules. Like a rule that he had was, don't tell me something is wrong unless you got a fix.
Mm.
You don't want people complaining, and that's a very smart rule. He said, "Oh, you got to say, oh, this is this, but I think we could do this." If you just sit there and say, "I don't like that," that would not fly. That would not. No. And that was a great rule. But there were other things. There were a lot of rules, and you going this because he was mentored by this really top producer.
Right.
I mean, he was brought in to fix Laverne and Shirley when the actors were having troubles. They brought them in. Yeah. And he settled them down. But that's like
right. I'm sorry. Also, Gary, Gary, on Happy Days started a softball team, because we talk about, the show as a family, and it sounds corny, but it really was. We played in charity games. We played on the cast, and then Brian Levant, myself, and some others, played the U.S. troops in Okinawa and Germany, and it just brought us closer. He wanted us to be, not know one another just on or off the set. It was just an incredible experience.
And look, did Laverne and Shirley have their own baseball team or not so much?
There was but it's so funny. Even Gary, Gary said, Happy Days was such a, I mean, there'd be some problem once in a while, but the difference between the Laverne and Shirley set and Happy Days, because I started in Laverne and Shirley, and I started, I think, 2 weeks before it went on the air.
Yeah.
Huge ratings, as you know, number one. And I'm coming to work the next day. I'm thinking, wow, people are going to be so happy, and they were. But some of the fights they'd have on this, and Cindy, who started me in the business, as I mentioned, just a wonderful, funny, generous lady. And but boy, some of the
I mean, I pulled up some stuff on the website, and I want you to tell me if it's true, Fred, because you worked on, I believe you just worked on one episode of that show, correct?
No, I worked quite a while. I just wrote one episode, but
I see.
There for quite a while. I'd say I started February on Laverne and Shirley, and then I started on Happy Days in September. And mention some stuff. I'll let you know if it's true. If I know.
I was reading that Cindy Williams feared that Penny Marshall would get preferential treatment because her brother Gary was one of the creators, so she demanded top billing. And to appease both actresses, it was decided that both of their names would appear on the screen at the same time. While Marshall's name appeared on the left side, Williams's name was higher up on the right, but this wasn't enough for Williams. In 1977, she complained to TV Guide that the writers gave Marshall more lines. Before long, the two lead actresses were fighting over the square footage of their dressing rooms, and the cast of Happy Days, whose set was right next to theirs, could sometimes hear fighting on the next stage. Does all of that seem accurate?
um, no, I mean, definitely you could hear them probably. But to my knowledge, Cindy never demanded top billing, but that could have, I wasn't in those negotiations. But the one thing that was true was when the show started, Penny was getting all the physical jokes, and Cindy would say, "Well, Gary, I think I could do this too." And then finally he said, and obviously she could do it, and and then fortunately they ended up being, very good friends. Because there were some definite, and when a gentleman named Bobby Hoffman was the dialogue coach, and he left to do a movie at Disney called Freaky Friday, and he recommended that I would be the dialogue coach, and that was always interesting because they weren't fond of running lines, shall we say? So one time Cindy and I kind of did this thing. We were running lines, and Cindy said something like, "Well, Fred, I just, I don't want to do that." And I said, "Cindy, you're doing it right now." And they were like stunned. They thought, "Oh gosh, this nice guy just yelled at Cindy," and we'd kind of set it up and stuff. But it was, but fortunately, both were, just wonderful physical,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I sat my nephews and nieces down to watch a Laverne and Shirley last year. It was the near Mexico episode.
Right.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
I never saw them laugh harder. It's just like you go, it was hilarious. And I'm going, it's actually ageless comedy. It really is. But I remember Dave talking about Laverne and Shirley, and I remember him saying, again, it's like Dave was a disciplinarian in a subtle way. So when he came to Laverne and Shirley, he said to the pair of them, "This is the deal: no throwing scripts into the trash can. You read it, and if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. But read it so we know. So we know did we do well? And if we didn't do well, we're going to fix it." I guess it was okay after that.
Yeah, Dave got there after I did. But one episode where they meet Fabian, the end when just Cindy was, they were he started singing, and Penny grabs his leg, and then Cindy starts hitting her head on the floor. Just one of the funniest scenes I've seen. It's just
when physical comedy comes together, it's just magic.
Yeah.
It's just magic. It's just it's sort of like I mean, I think we did great physical comedy on Family Matters.
Yeah. And I actually want
Frank-
to ask you, Steve, about the season 2 episode that you wrote, Flash Pants, where Carl enters the policeman charity dance contest, breaks his back, and there's some physical comedy there at the end, and the climactic dance scene with his like rival police partner,
uh-huh.
and also great physical comedy like when he's like hanging by the swinging kitchen door. With someone like Reginald Vell Johnson, who like me and my co-host Andrew have talked over and over about how he's great. He's seems to be underrated, especially in terms of like in relation to Jaleel. I feel like Reginald sometimes doesn't get the credit that he deserves in terms of how he could, you know,
True.
certain facial expressions or just certain ways of speaking lines. Like he just knows how to hit those comedic and dramatic beats as well
True.
as he can. And like when you're working with a seasoned talent like that, is it one of those things where you still gotta like detailed like right on the script, like okay, you take this physical comedic beat, you take that physical comedic beat? Or is Reginald the type of actor where you could just kind of write some vague generic things and then you can trust that he'll just put some extra spice on it, if that makes sense?
Sometimes, like I would say in the script, like Flash Pants, I would bet a lot of it was found on the floor.
Mm.
That the directors they added on the floor. So we'd come down to run through sometime to see stuff that we hadn't written, but they knew we were going to laugh. So the directors are a key component um, of this process, um, and we had some great ones.
We did.
We really did.
Right. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Speaking of that, I just Rich Correll and I are, like, still best friends, and it's funny. He told me something I never even knew, like a couple of weeks ago, that he really brought a lot of stuff to the character of Urkel. He suggested, I forgot to whom.
I think you related it to like Jerry Lewis to Jaleel, like you're a little Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, yeah. And Rich added a lot of the physical comedy and bumping into stuff,
Yeah.
and so yeah, Steve said, some directors add a lot, some not, but yeah, some just really, really
They really bring it. Like
yeah.
I was on listening to a podcast on Frasier,
Yeah.
and it was Ted Danson and I forget the other actor's name. They were
Kelsey
talking.
Grammer.
No. The other bartender.
Oh, Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Everybody
So
knows your name. Yeah.
and so yeah, so and ironically, as it's a strange thing, the woman in the main titles of Cheers, who's wearing shorts and is walking in the shot in the main title,
Mhm.
is the woman that hired me in my first movie.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Small world.
Yeah, she did location thing for those shots, and she was an extra in it. But
I think you bought her the shorts, I think.
but
Yeah.
what they talked about how James Burrows would add stuff, and I would have thought everything was written, but like there was one episode of Cheers where Diane Chambers got angry and frustrated, and she marched out of the bar. Then Carla is sitting up by the coat rack. Diane's coat is on the rack, and you see the door open and Diane's hand, reaching for the coat. And what Jim Burrows did was he told Carla to grab the coat rack,
Yep.
rack, and
I remember
slowly
this
pull
moment.
it away from her.
Yep.
That's the kind of stuff where you're going, as a writer, you can't see that necessarily. You might, but you might not. But when you're on the floor and you're doing it, and frankly, you're with a lot of funny people, stuff happens. And,
And also during our run throughs, we would suggest, some physical things. And that's why we all went to the run throughs to work on what isn't working, what to add.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there were moments like that in Family Matters that that had that sort of thing where if you put the actors up on their feet and sort of play around with the script more, you find those moments like that, whether it be like, I don't know, Steve following Carl to the door and Carl is looking back wondering why he's following him, and then Steve is just kind of doing his walk following, like the little moments like that.
Yeah, but it's fun adding things, especially when the shoot night, it's a huge laugh. And that's always
I only had One, which I thought was a scary week. An actor who had a big part in the episode comes to the table reading and bombs at the table.
Oh no.
Just like bombs. Known actor. Go to the run through. He's still not there. And on Tuesday, I think it was, and Dave says, I may have to fire this guy.
No.
And he's like, and he's still a very well known actor today.
Right.
And
Do we want to name
then
the actor or no?
I'll just say, when he's interviewed, he sounds kind of crazy. And that's all I'll say.
That narrows it down.
That's like going, sounds really crazy.
Oh
So,
my God.
anyway, so what it was that he wasn't thinking about all of us and the rest of the cast. He was saving everything for film night. He was just walking through it. And then when film night came on, the cameras came on, he did the show. But Dave had a tough decision right there. But he finally figured it out, whatever. And it worked out. But it was like, since then I've always thought, okay, this guy's nuts. And it's been proven over and over and over again in the public. And you go like, oh God.
Oh
It's
boy.
like, yeah, I actually heard someone saying, oh, I'm starting a film with this guy next week. I'm going, and I was sitting going,
And I'll say who it was. It was Steve.
What?
No, not really.
No.
It was you, Steve Langford. It was you.
Yeah.
No. It was like, no, it was just like, it was just like, it was one of these things of like, what's going on here? I'm on this out of control bus because this guy's not delivering. And I don't think we ever fired an actor midweek.
Yeah,
I don't think we ever did. No, never did. That was a close one. That was a close call. That's
Got it.
an actor being selfish. Generally, the actors really are feed off each other and they want to work with each other and trying to make the thing happen. That's been most of the case that I've seen. But this guy was like, he was coming from the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also the actors. I've heard people that had a little part on Family Matters, and years later they'll say, the cast treated them, them very well, which is, obviously very important. Same with Happy Days.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember, one of the guest stars that we interviewed, actually, no, two of the guest stars we interviewed, they were in season 1 episodes before you guys were on. Jacques Bolton, who played a basketball idol of Eddie and Carl's in a season 1 episode. He talked about how great he was treated by the cast. Susan Merson, who was in I think maybe the 8th episode of the first season, where she was one of the professional contractors when Carl was clumsily trying to build a bathroom for his mother. I mean, she had great things to say about the cast. So yeah, I mean, I think it says a lot when everybody who has guest starred on the show has said, wow, like what a professional, lovely cast to work with.
And it was funny when I was working on Silver Spoons. So I'll get back to Family Matters. I'm going back to it, but
no, you're good.
Comparison was like when they were filming, they make a lot of mistakes. They have to go back and go back and go back. Actually, it was sort of disheartening to me at a certain point. As a young writer, I mean, I was like, "Oh God!" It's like, so my friend of mine said, "Hey, I got a ticket to Cheers. You want to go see it?"
Yeah.
Sure. So I go to see Cheers, Cameron, which episode it was, but it was the way it was supposed to be. They came in, they hit their marks. They did the scene, moving on. Hit their marks. It's like going, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't like Friends where they shipped in 2 audiences.
No. It was like going, we was just boom, boom, boom. It was like going, oh, this is great. I do want to do this. And then it came to Family Matters, and Family Matters was just like that. We were just like, hit the marks, do the scene, moving on. There's like this totally professional. And of course, hilarious to boot. But it was just like this. It was the situation I kind of dreamed of like, yeah, I want to be in a situation where the actors are pros like Cheers. Because those guys were like, they didn't screw around. They were like, they got the job done. You came in and I think maybe we were there for an hour,
Wow.
But he's just like, but it was.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely more than an hour, but
I mean, more than an hour, but it was, you did not go late.
Short.
On Cheers, it was not, we were out of there relatively, it was an early evening.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, just a sidelight on Boxcar Blues, Mark Lynn Baker directed it. It was on.
Oh, from Perfect Strangers. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that he directed.
Yeah, that might have been his first. And then Jason Bateman observed for a while, a couple of.
Jason Bateman, he directed an episode in like 1997. I forgot what it was called. What was that about?
Well,
how did that happen?
Well, just put it this from my personal perspective. I'm on Silver Spoons. I'm an assistant, and Jason Bateman is constantly sneaking up and popping up and scaring me. He's like 13 years old. And years later, you come, and I believe he may have directed one of my episodes. I can't remember. But and we also later hired him on Malcolm and Eddie. He's amazing guy, amazing talent. I mean, frankly, any actor who can direct, their intellect is you have to be a very smart person, because as a writer, we're much more we're not subjective. We're not really subjective. We're not really looking at ourselves. We're more objective. Get the job done, make this thing happen.
Yeah.
But for an actor that can direct, they have to switch between objective and subjective. There they go. They got to turn off the subjective. That's gone. I'm a director now. Apparently hard to do. Had read saw this interview with Michael Caine, who had this video in acting, and he does incredible stuff. That the technique of what he would do, these things, the little subtle things you do for that. The editors need this, and I'll do this thing. Just you go like, you can't believe what a technician this guy is. And the interviewer said to him, and this is where I learned this. He goes, "Oh my Michael, you know so much about. Why haven't you directed?" Oh my dear boy, no. I'm subjective completely. That's a subjective personality. I'm not that. And it's like he knew that. Oh, interesting. Oh, he's fully aware of it. So a lot of actors are fully aware of it, and some would never do it because they know that's not me. But the ones that can do it, wow.
Yeah. And I worked with Jason on a show called It's Your Move that Ron Levitt and Michael Moy did.
Yeah.
Donna, Married with Children. And you could see Jason was, so good, and wasn't surprising. He could.
So actually bouncing off of Malcolm and Eddie, Steve, your experience working on that show. I remember watching the reruns when I was a kid growing up, and I think what always seems to be like the most recent headline about that show is like, Malcolm Jamal Warner will go on, say, like the Breakfast Club radio show and talk about how he wasn't in love working with that show because I guess he was comparing it to the writing standard that was set in his mind by his experience on the Cosby Show. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, because it seemed like Malcolm, when he was talking about his experience on the show, came up from an experience of like, oh, they were like leaning in on unfortunate Black stereotypes on that show, and that's not what Bill Cosby did on his show. So what was your experience? Because I found it a fun show to watch. I love Malcolm. I love Eddie Griffin. So what was your experience writing on that show, and did Malcolm bring any of that energy to the set? Like, what was your experience?
I would say it was a difficult set.
Oh,
I would say that I don't think he and Eddie got along.
Well, why was that?
Well, again, he grew up with Cosby and a different system of writing, and a kind of a different approach. But that's unique to that, right? What he said, you're not going to get the same thing on another show. Well, I mean, it's like, we came in the second season, the third and fourth seasons, and I'm pretty proud of what we did. I mean, we did the Top of Wingo Witch Project. So we did a whole kind of hidden, lost camera kind of thing. We experimented with stuff. We did a lot of experimentation in those last few seasons. But it's like comparing the two shows is, it doesn't make any sense. And it's like and I think we had to work harder than, say, in Family Matters to get there. Because I don't think there was a sweet spot in the show, really. I don't think there was, no.
So how did it last as long as it did? Because it had a decent run for
88 episodes, but it was sort of like, what it was that we had to be more story intensive.
Yeah.
You had to up the game. You had to have a bigger idea for an episode, and so we would come with bigger ideas to compensate. But it was with the writers, first season writers. I was running the table on that show for the first time, and I had one of the writers was one of Eddie's friends who was like a potential HR nightmare.
Mm.
So I'm like sitting here, and my eyes like on this guy, like, don't you do that. And because I got women on staff, and I'm like, don't you pull anything.
Right.
And he was one day he talks about how and using a vernacular, yes, about writing for the porno awards, whatever they call
Oh,
those things. But he used a colorful term.
okay.
And the women just kind of like, I'm like hearing, my heart drops like, oh shit, right? And the women, so interestingly, like, it's so ridiculous. They start laughing like, what has this guy said now? So I'm
Right.
like, oh, but I was like, but he was gone the next season. But we had actually a pretty good time. My favorite time on Malcolm and Eddie was we would tape 2 shows on a Friday night.
Oh.
We took an early show, like maybe at 4, have dinner, tape a show at 7.
Long day.
So, but again, it's Dave Duclon's running the show, so things are
Oh,
going
okay.
very
So
quickly. So it's like,
faster
you know,
day.
yeah. So it's like, so we're sitting there, and the writer, the writing staff and I would go, and we watch Canon reruns of Canon between shows,
Mm.
and the show's so ridiculous now. It's just so ridiculous. You're just like, it's so dated.
Mm.
You put like 6 comedy writers room watching Canon. It's hilarious. Right. So we're just like, we're finding jokes everywhere. It's just like, and one of the guys was a comedian, so he's just ripping it up. It was like, it was our thing, our go-to thing. Every Friday night we watch Canon.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it's just, but that's part of the joys, one of the joys of working with comedy writers. You laugh so much. You laugh.
Yeah.
God, you laugh.
And that's what made I assume that's what made the experience mostly pleasant for you is just
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. We just,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. What and I assume Fred, the same went for you, and your experience would say Happy Days. It seems like that writers' room was a very collaborative and fun one. Correct?
Oh, yes. Just so it's, it sounds corny, but it's like, God, we're getting paid for this? It was just
true. It's
Yeah.
true.
so much fun.
Yeah.
And then I was, so lucky to start on Laverne and Shirley, then on a show for 7 years, and then on Family Matters for just incredibly lucky. I mean,
The thing is that I was thinking about the other day, Fred, and this is interesting, is that there literally are only, you can count in the thousands on this planet that can do this work.
yeah,
That's a really amazing thing. You're going, there's only thousands of people that can write TV shows or movies.
yeah.
Most people can't do it.
Sure.
And it's like, it's kind of like, it's a little, I mean, when you think of back in those days, we were part of maybe 1,000 writers,
Yeah.
maybe 2,000 that did this work. That's like being in Congress.
Yeah.
Statistically, like going, it's like one of these things you look back and go, whoa, if I knew that, would I have done this?
Right.
Oh, so it's like I have to be part of the 0.1% or something.
Yeah.
Human beings, I'm like, oh,
Joe, and also what was interesting when Steve and I were working, sometimes we'd be on writing panels, and there'd be people that wanted to be in the business, and there was that kind of dichotomy where you'd want to be very truthful, and you wouldn't want to hurt people's dreams, so you would say, it is very tough, it can happen. Look at me, but it was interesting. And, we would say, what do you say to people that want to get in the business, and you want to be very positive? You point out the tough part, but, it happened to me. It can happen to, people, but, so many people come to Hollywood, they're stars in their high school and stuff. And then, it's such a huge talent pool. And also, when we were casting, it was always interesting. When people would come in, they'd leave the room, and sometimes someone right away would look at their resume and they'd say, "Oh, well, they haven't done anything." And I would say, what others would say, well, if they have no experience, you have to give them a chance.
Give them something. They have to start somewhere.
Yeah, if they flub a line, you redo it. So it's an interesting process. And also, what was tough for actors is, if there's a part, Steve might recommend someone, I might recommend someone, and maybe the other producers, and then the cast director, he or she has people they work with. So, I would say, and others would say, okay, bring in, some requests and some people, but let's say bring in some, some new people. Let's try to give people a chance. And
Yeah.
sometimes it really paid off.
we also had times where we had casting, and Dave says, we don't have the person. There a
Yeah.
couple times it was like, you're going, he said, I did. And it's like, I'm like, the casting director, you know, she's kind of in a nervous situation because she's picked these people and hoping that they're going to nail it and her job is done. But when she doesn't nail it, it's like, she's like a wreck. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And
Can you think of a Family
happens.
Matter? Can you think of a
Family-
Can you think of a Family Matters episode where that occurred, where you thought you had the person and then it just didn't come through, and then you're
No,
kind of
it was the
side
case
pressure
that they never got that far. They'd come into the casting in the back of the lot and you'd see 6 people and none of them could do it. And it's very, very infrequent this happened, but Dave would
Right.
just say, nope, go back to the beginning. You don't have it.
Mm.
I don't see the person there.
Wow.
A lot of
But again,
times,
very rare.
right? A lot of times I'd be reading it, casting the other parts, which was fun and interesting.
And sometimes you were on the show one time, weren't you?
Oh yeah, with Jim, we did the Aunt Una, where Donna Summer guest starred. Remember, it was the karaoke contest.
Yeah, karaoke thing.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
Donna Summer played Jaleel's aunt, who, you know, no confidence whatsoever, but when she sang, so I was a contestant in the karaoke contest. That was when I sang. Remember that there's
The
a
Japanese song, right?
Sukiyaki or Sukiyaki.
There's a song from the 60s, right?
Right. So I
Yeah.
sang that, and then afterwards, an Asian gentleman was wearing a cowboy and sang "Home on the Range," and then Jim Gagan was the MC, right? Remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's
And
great.
Donna was that was something else. That was quite.
Yeah. She was.
It's like that was, you know, hearing someone sing next to you, like who could really sing,
Yeah.
it is a amazing experience. Like I was at this, I went to a memorial, and my wife's friend is in theater, Broadway, whatnot. So he had some singers at this memorial, and the woman that wrote "The Rose,"
Wow.
that song came out and belted the song on better than Bette Midler.
Jeez.
It was like, oh my God, he's here. And then I found out, because I didn't know this, but the song "The Rose" was written for a Janis Joplin biopic they didn't make.
Wow.
I had no idea.
I had no idea. It was apparently the family didn't want to do it finally, and so it ended up morphing into "The Rose." But yeah, it's like it's these experiences. You're going, yeah, that you've experienced so many things. I mean, I have one friend, Alan Steven, who worked on Roseanne. This man can never repeat a story. He's lived 20 lives. I mean, just crazy,
Wow.
you know, because I remember, like, he'll say to me, did I tell you the time I was jamming with John Lennon?
Yeah.
So I'm like, Alan, I've known you like 15 years. Why didn't you start there? But that's the thing, is that you're in this thing, in the middle of it, you're meeting all kinds of people.
A writer question for you, actually, because I had noticed in a number of season 2 episodes, Steve, Rachel's Place, Torn Between Two Lovers, Marriage 101, Flash Pants, The Crash Course, Cousin Urkel, Dog Day Halloween, etc. You were listed as a story editor. What does a story editor do?
Well, I'm just the second to lowest writer on the show at that point. I am basically, I'm in the room for the story conferences. I'm pitching. I'm, pitching stories, writing scripts.
Right.
I'm not in editing. I'm not doing editing. I'm not doing casting. So it's sort of like, and oh boy, I tell you, I kept getting jobs as a staff writer, the level below. On the first 1, 2, 3 shows I did. Finally, I got a deal, be story editor in the last episode of one season of the Robert Guillaume show. So that was a big deal, because what it is that here's the difference. When you're a story editor, you write a script, you get paid for the script. If you're a staff writer, you get a salary, and the salary is against the script. That's the big difference. But you're still a junior writer pretty much. And you're just doing whatever they tell you to do. That's pretty much, that's basically it. But we didn't have any producing responsibilities.
I see.
I mean, we were obviously there for the table reads and the run throughs and the filming, but we didn't have as much responsibility. At a certain point, when we became Vita, Sarah, and I became producers, there was this issue about the costumes department was not working with the art department. So costumes would come in with stuff that would clash or blend in to the set. So every Wednesday, Vita, Sarah, and I had to go down to the stage and approval of the costumes
Right.
because they literally would not work together. Yeah, it was just like, it was some fiefdoms or whatever, but so we just came and we just said, no, you can't use that. You got to use this.
Stole a lot of the costumes too, I think.
But I remember one time we were coming in for costume check, maybe in the 5th season or something, I think. And Jaleel comes running in and he falls like on me, like panting. I said, what's wrong? He said, oh man. I go, what? I was just at a Clippers game. I said, yeah. So I'm at the Clippers game and I hear the announcer say, and now for your entertainment, rerun from what's happening now.
Wow.
He's out doing the popping and locking thing. And Jaleel goes, don't let that happen to me. Don't
let that be my fate.
Yeah, your face. He was terrified. He saw it. He's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Bouncing off the costuming, because that was a big thing that we had comments about in our season 1 and 2 recaps, was like the very loud, interesting costume choices. I mean, whether it be Laura is wearing like this cow color themed outfit, or Eddie is wearing like a very flower filled jean jacket. So bouncing off of that, like any specific examples where you could think of where like maybe an Eddie or Laura or Steve wore something that clashed against the set and you had to change it.
Oh, they never. It apparently it did happen because the network complained.
Right.
That was the one they never did say. And I said, you got someone in a brown suit, and you got a brown set.
Mm.
That was actually that came from the network that they were like did not like that. So that's why we were down there. But
are there rules? Is there like a set of rules for like, okay, you can't have a clothing color match the set color? Is that like sort of a list that you have to go by, or is it just?
It was not a list, but it was like, we knew the task was you just like you looked at the outfit, you knew what the set looked like, and you knew whether it's going to work or not.
It would clash.
It would clash. It was like it would just be, but it was just a thing where, I don't know, both the people that were responsible are now gone, have passed away, but I don't know what it was. Again, whatever fights went on, whatever arguments, we would never know.
Mm.
Dave and Gary would know. David and Gary would know, but we would never know. Like we heard a story from one of the actors just recently. I'm not going to repeat it, but it's something. Wow, that was big. We never knew that. That's what I think Fred and I realized we didn't. They kept everything from us. We didn't know anything.
I see.
So we didn't. There was no. The gossip didn't get back to us. Yeah. And frankly, when we did the costume check, the actors never said anything to us like that. They were complaining to us or anything. We just were like just a bit annoyed that art department and costuming wouldn't work together. But that was the deal. Dave said, "Go ahead and check the costumes," and we did. And sometimes, there was stuff that you can't use this. The set is a set. The set's built. The costumes can change, not the set.
Right.
And
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sid.
No, go ahead.
Oh, John, I heard your podcast on Dog Day Halloween.
Yeah.
And, Dave Ducline and I wrote, but I thought it was your comments and then Andrew Stewart, very interesting. I thought that was, because I've never heard a podcast, talk about costumes. But
what did you find interesting about the recap?
Just both your takes on certain what the characters were wearing. Very very interesting, because I had never heard anyone comment on, and I thought it was some you love, and you said call Fred. Why did they do that? No, I'm just kidding. It was very interesting.
Yeah. I think our favorite part of the episode was the running joke of I think maybe it was the robber that kept confusing which iconic like black female singer Laura was. Like calling her Shaka Khan, Paula Abdul, like whatever hot black female singer at the time it was. I wanted to ask you, Fred, a couple of episodes you had written in season 2, Fast Eddie Winslow and Busted, both revolved around Eddie owing money to somebody and trying to pay it off with both gambling and also taking advantage of Steve's intelligence during said gambling. like that kind of like reoccurring story device, is that something that you love to come back to because that hits you personally? Is that just something that you find is a strength with Darius and his character? Like, oh, teenagers, love to get into gambling trouble. Like, what's the idea behind crafting episodes
No,
like
it's an excellent question. And again, it's interesting because Steve could come up with the story. I could come up with a story, and someone else, writes it. But personally, I'm a poker player and stuff, and so it was fun.
A very good poker player, by the way.
that? Oh,
Well, thank you.
okay.
See, Fred
So
and I would sit at Fred and I would sit at the
kind
table together. Fred and I would sit at the table together for the readings every Monday. He'd sit down and tell me how much he won,
of dear.
and I was
Yeah,
like,
Wow.
I'm sitting there going, "Oh my god, he's a
sorry,
very
sorry.
good poker player."
Well, thank you. But I sound like a jerk. I'm sorry to say.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, no,
You
no,
know,
you're
he'd
great.
say it really.
Well,
He'd say
and,
like, no,
there were
he'd say it
times
really
that
quietly. He
too, but
whispered to me. He
it
whispered
was,
to me.
and then we thought, when we decided, not just me, or we all decided to do that story. We thought it was, would be a good, a good vehicle to show some of, their either their acting in it or their points of view. And Carl obviously wasn't thrilled that Eddie was, then we did another episode where, Eddie, maybe it was that where lost some money, and then Carl went back to play. And then we did, in another episode we did where, Steve ended up, Lieutenant Jenner was playing in a poker game, and then Steve played, then Harriet played.
Yeah,
So,
Murtaugh.
we just,
Well,
that's kind of
thing is, because Steve is so smart, that became almost a starting point for a lot of different stories. It allowed us to do a lot of things. It allowed us to do Stefan. It allowed us to do, just any number of things. So that his brilliance allowed us to. He was a very great story generator. Because I bet in that gambling one, someone probably said, "Oh God, Steve could count cards or whatever. He could. We you, Eddie could figure out, like, I could use his intellect to make money." It's like, that's, again, that's really, it's right there. It's right there. You go like,
right.
I mean, basically it's sort of like Jaleel kind of gives you the writers a bunch of equations to work with. And you keep kind of doing different equations. Like, oh, if I do this with this, him with her, da 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 da, oh, was this funny if he did this? So it was like he just made the show uh much easier to write.
True. Also, I think in the pool one, he realized what angles we were, to make the shots, and but he just
Yeah.
his intellect.
His intellect, yeah, was a big driver in a lot of the stories.
Wow. Fred, with the Finding the Words episode that you wrote, where Harriet and Rachel meet their long lost father Jimmy, of course, played by the iconic Paul Winfield. Um, Given the huge impact that it had on them in that episode, we, my co-host and I, and a bunch of fans on, say, Reddit, were wondering, like, why did Jimmy never come back? Was there ever any discussion? Because I would think that, like, these ladies met their father for the first time in many years. Maybe he might come back in other guest starring forms. Was there any consideration on having Jimmy come back, given the impact that he had on that episode?
It's Steve.
I don't think so.
There wasn't. No, there
No,
wasn't.
I don't think so.
and
I
it-
think, yeah, I don't think there was. It was just sort of like it was. That's a kind of one of those things where you write the character and you go, "Can we get Paul Winfield?" And you get him. You don't expect to get him again. You just
Right.
go, you're just stunned that you got him, and he's there on the set, and you're going,
You know,
"Go ahead."
yeah, but that's a very good question. I think sometimes, Caesar, we're so, busy, we're working on that week's script the next week that, just constantly, churn out episodes. Sometimes one forgets to either, think back and also when you do a story like that, because that was one of the, quote unquote serious ones. And when we do shows like that, I think, it's important as a nice variation. But I think it would have been for example, on Happy Days, I wrote an episode called The Mechanic, where Fonzie hires a mechanic over the phone, and the guy shows up in a wheelchair. And because we didn't want to be didactic, but we wanted to kind of introduce maybe young kids that haven't dealt with the quote unquote disabled.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. There's a big article in the Times. When you do a show like that, you don't want to enhance any, falsehoods. It's kind of like taking a chance. And I remember I was on board of directors of a company called Path Performing Arts Theater, the handicapped. And it's, difficult enough for an actor to get a role, let alone a disabled person. So when we did that episode, it's always tough because you're not going to make everybody happy. So I remember we had a Christmas party and some of the actors, disabled actors we worked with, some loved the episode. Some said, "Okay, why did you make the gentleman in the wheelchair so bitter?" So, anytime you do kind of a serious episode, you want to, we got a lot of letters from organizations that were, very happy we did it. So back to the Finding the Words episode, why didn't we see, that again? And, would Harriette and Rachel, forgive them? So yeah, and again, I didn't come up with the idea, I forgot who did, but we all, all discussed it.
Yeah. I thought that sometimes it's hard to remember where the idea started because so many times it can be in the room or
Right.
if someone says one sentence, it sets off another writer to say another sentence, and then you go, "Oh, wait a minute, we do this and that." So it
Right.
all sometimes it's just the 8 of us or whatever, But I just did remember a strange anecdote back on Family Matters. I was at the bungalow, I was standing on the steps of the bungalow, and this is right. It's a bungalow right by the main administration building, and there's some editing suites across from me. So I was standing there, and one of the younger female writers comes running up to me and kind of hugs me. And I'm like, what is going on here?
That was me.
No, I was like going, what is going on here? She's like acting like I'm her boyfriend or something. I'm like going, what's going on? Beep, beep, beep. Steven Seagal walks around the corner. He looks at me, looks at her, and does that little praying thing he does and goes in the editing room. And I'm like, she was running away from Steven Seagal.
Oh no.
He was hitting on her. And I was like, and I was the protection.
Oh God.
The story
But-
I told you about the actor, we picked up on the golf course.
Yeah,
He was coming to see Mr. Seagal.
that's right. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He was the story goes, even though his Warner Brothers films made a ton of money for them, they didn't want him around. They were like done.
Yeah,
Wow.
They were done. They were like that. This is just,
I've heard it. I've heard he was.
you go like, yeah. I mean, it was just, but that was my Steven Seagal encounter. I was like going, this is so weird.
Wow, she ran up and hugged you. Wow.
He did. She ran up to try to make sure that he knew that I was the big black boyfriend. And I'm like going, I was like, I was the safety net. Cause it was like, whatever happened, she was like, oh shit. I was the one to protect her. And was like, all I did is I just looked at him and I'm like going, I was totally confused, but I'm like going,
Yeah.
what is this? And I remember I was, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And
It all makes sense now.
Then he disappeared in the editing suite and that was it. But it was just like, oh my God. See, that's the thing is like the strange part of Hollywood, I usually don't see.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm so straight, I've probably only seen cocaine once in my life.
Yeah.
Okay.
One time, that was it.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
my
I never
God.
drank. I never did. I look like maybe I did drive, but I didn't.
No, it's not. It's just like you go, it's the kind of thing you're going, I guess, it's like going, you feel so fortunate.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Right.
Why would
Speaking of which, Steve, I believe you wrote an episode of Webster where Webster and Nikki, like they have something with a basketball star who is like using cocaine.
Yeah.
Is that does that come from your only experience of seeing cocaine?
No.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'll tell you what, I had this after I quit Sony, when Norman Lear sold the company and I got a check for $5,000. I said, I'm going to be a writer. So I went off. And that summer, my agent got me in the pitch at all these different shows and I'd sell every single time.
Oh.
And I was like, it was like, I guess this is what the freelancing career in the 60s must have been like for
Right.
writers. It doesn't really exist that much anymore, but it was fun. It was actually a lot of fun. Because I would come up with these ideas, I'd sell every single time. But I would tell people I was selling and other friends, and finally, the guy that got me the job on Silver Spoon got me an assignment on Webster.
Mm.
And that
I
was
mean,
sort of
because
like,
yeah, because by then it was not even on network anymore. It was
no,
on
so it was
syndication.
syndicated, and it wasn't a good story. It was just like, I'm like, pay was good, but it was like, this is not really great. And
Yeah.
they rewrote it a lot, and I didn't blame them.
What was it like originally, and what did it end up being?
Same thing, but it's just sort of bland. I'm like, I just felt it was sort of bland.
Yeah.
And I wrote A Small Wonder, and I remember going to the taping thinking, oh my God, my name's on this.
Oh man.
Because I remember I told these guys, these friends that, listen, I sold a story to Howard. I said, oh, congratulations, but now you got to work with Howard. I was
Oh
like,
no.
so it's like, so it was sort of like, but it was this great summer of just like being, you know, this, I didn't have to be anywhere. I just would, at home, I could write, they pay me, and then I got the job on Silver Spoons. So, but what I was doing was my mentor came in the business first as a comedian, but selling scripts, not being on staff. So when he saw me leave the show to be a writer, that impressed him. And I didn't know I was selling myself. I called Jim and say, I sold him the script. I sold him the script. I was like going, I think I sold 2 What's Happenings and A Small Wonder. It's crazy. Webster was like, I mean, it was great. It was a great feeling. And, but so when the opening came up in Silver Spoons, I was the top of the list.
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
didn't realize I was selling myself. I didn't realize it. That all those sales was like, oh, okay, I'm in the game now.
Right. So Fred, I think you also had an experience. I think you wrote didn't you write a season 1 episode of Webster?
Uh,
I think
no,
I had that in my
no, it
notes.
was might have been season 2, because when Happy Days ended, John Barbara, who was an executive at Paramount, asked if I would go to Webster. God, now I'm completely blanking on.
No, it's okay. Yeah,
You
because
know
I
what? I had an interview about Silver Spoons, and then maybe the same thing is happening here. Is that you find that they were asking me about Silver Spoons, and I find I blocked a lot of it on my memory.
Huh.
And I mean, I know who you were working with, but the human mind does that. If something's sort of traumatic,
Yeah.
and working with somebody who's really, really a jerk,
Mm.
terrible person.
Yeah.
I was realizing it was very strange to find it, 'cause it was a live broadcast. I was like sitting here stumbling and fumbling, going, "Oh my God, I don't remember. I
Yeah.
blocked it out."
That's so. I remember almost every episode. We remember jokes, but yeah, I just can't remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was traumatic. You don't
Right.
want to remember it.
Yeah, because
Um,
IMDb, Fred, IMDb had you like writing it was a 1984 season 1 episode. I forgot what it was about, but I just want to get your thoughts on working because I believe it was season 1 where the actors who played the parents, they
Oh,
weren't liking the new direction the show was taking, where Emmanuel Lewis was going to become the star. And I was wondering
right.
if that played a role in your writing, but you're kind of saying maybe season 1 or season 2 is what you wrote, because I believe season 2 is where kind of like everybody was on equal footing on what the identity of Webster was going to
Oh,
be.
right. Oh, it
So
was interesting. Yeah, I was there. Exactly. Some writers on the show, when they heard I was offered to be on the show, said, "Fred, basically, run away. Just don't do it."
yeah,
John Barber asked me, and John said, "Fred, you're showrunner on Happy Days with Brian Levant the last 2 years. I can't promise you a producer credit, whatever." And I said, "Oh, it's fine. I'd like to help." Um, but yeah, there was very tough between the showrunners, and then, um, Susan and Alex. A lot of
the actors who play the parents. Yeah.
right, lot of battles, which was too bad. And one reason I don't, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but Manuel was, such a, great kid. And one time we're walking to a rehearsal, and Emmanuel's in front of the stage, and 2 of his friends are there, visiting, and we're walking, and one of the little kids, Emmanuel's friend, asked one of the showrunners what they did on the show, and the person screams and goes, "What do I do on the show? I'm the executive producer," to this little kid. And it was very sad.
Oh,
Yeah, that was yeah.
So
It's like it's like though but fortunately, Fred and I have had, you know, been with mostly good people.
just 99%.
Boy, yeah, like I mean, I can't imagine people that have to be in a job with a person like that for a long period of time.
yeah.
Boy,
It's tough.
It's tough.
Steve,
Yeah,
Steve did it for, what was it, 2 years, Steve, with your first?
yeah, I did it for about 2 years,
That's
and it was just
Silver Spoons or Webster? I'm sorry.
Silver Spoons.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I was an assistant for 2 years with this guy. It was just, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like he was notorious. It was like he got the showrunners fired on Silver Spoons to get the job,
Wow.
and then when he got fired from the Bradley Harper thing, then the next job he had was under the guys he got fired.
So how did they react to that? Did they do a revenge tactic or?
I think the revenge was just there. You know, like,
There you go.
it's like it's just you're working for me again, and it's like it was just there.
Yeah.
And I think Cindy Williams was on that show too.
Interesting.
Yeah, but but yeah, it's like we've mostly have avoided bad situations, and there are toxic writers' rooms.
Yeah.
I've never seen them, but it's like the thing about the writing staff on Family Matters is we really didn't come in with an agenda.
right.
Really said, here are the characters. How do we make these people laugh? We had no idea in the world that this thing would still be talked about today. And there's a point where I was going, Peels and Keys were doing a Family Matters sketch.
Key and Peele, yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. That was 20 years ago. Whenever they decided, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It happens maybe to Lucy.
Yeah.
Not to us.
Yeah. And then they have these like dark days of comedy sort of documentary specials where you talk about the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, right.
And actually, which brings me to this question. So, and I think Jaleel had addressed this in one of those Dark Days of Comedy series. In season 2, we get the debut of Myrtle Urkel and Cousin Urkel, and I think Steve, you had a story editor credit on that episode. And me and my co-hosts were just kind of baffled by like, oh, hey, this is like the last time we see Myrtle until like season 7. And I wonder if it's related to the often said backstage story about, I think it was something in the matter of like Reggie and Joe Marie weren't happy with Myrtle because it kind of like put out this stereotype of, black men or black boys playing girls for comedy, and Jaleel was crying in his dressing room afterwards and his dad had to comfort him. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the fact that we didn't see Myrtle for a long time, or was it just, there wasn't anything doable to write for Myrtle until season 7. So what are your thoughts?
As you said before, John, it's like we've realized a lot was kept from us.
See, so this was one of those things.
So we would not be necessarily privy to that. Is that a possibility that could? It sounds like it could be a possibility.
I had heard that. Was that in Jaleel's book, John?
Jaleel did not specifically write that in his book, but he's talked about it in a docuseries called Dark Side of Comedy, I believe.
Right. I had heard that, and I'm not sure where. But that could have been.
Could have been. So, I mean, I assume by the time he does Myrtle at that point, I probably has a lot more power at that point, so he could probably do whatever he wanted.
It was a fun character. I wrote Dumbbell of the Ball, but it was a fun. He did a great job.
He really did. The thing was, with Jaleel was he was like Peter Sellers in a way. You throw anything at him, anything he'll do it and to go 100%.
Yeah.
So you could do all different kinds of characters. Also, just there was nothing that he couldn't do.
So, what was that conversation like? Fast forward to season 7, where it's like, oh, hey, remember that character Jaleel did way back in season 2? Let's do that. Like, how did that suddenly spring about? Was it just kind of like you guys were looking for ideas and that came about, or was there something?
It just became part of the mix of what we were doing.
Yeah, because we're pitching. yeah, just finding stories, and we thought, hey, let's bring back Myrtle. It wasn't.
Yeah, there's never were there never were things of like, oh, we don't want to do this because
Right, right,
that was never the thought process. The thought process was purely, how do we make these people laugh?
right,
I
right.
mean, I remember one time, well, we did Stevil, the Halloween episode.
Yeah.
And the best fun about that was,
Gives me nightmares, by the way, to Stevil.
I'm sorry,
well,
we're sorry.
I'm going there. I'm going there. So,
Appropriately
so,
enough.
so I said, so we started to do Stevil 2, right? We knew, oh, the audience may not have seen Stevil 1, so we're going to play Stevil 1 before the show begins filming. And we're on the floor, 250 people in the stage. Stevil begins playing. People are shrieking, they're freaking out. It's like it's a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're like going, we hear laughter coming from that stage. We were in terror coming from the stage. And I'm
Yeah.
like going, oh, I kind of get what the horror thing is about now. It's like, yeah, that's kind of fun to be able to, and that's what I kind of do now. Um, but it was such a great experience of like watching them like jumping in their chairs and shaking, like, oh
Yeah.
my God, we made a scary show. We really made a scary show that scares people.
Yeah. Like the
And
Halloween episode. Yeah.
it's like, we were like, yeah, I was like, I'm going, yeah, we really rocked it on that one. That was great.
Oh my God. And you know what? And what I love, and this is part of the Family Matters conversation that people continue to have today is, ranking, all these episodes in terms of quality. Like, oh, is there a time where, Family Matters was at its creative peak? And maybe is there a time where they weren't so much?
The old jump the shark.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I was gonna go, Fred. You're probably tired of talking about this, but
No, not at all.
okay, so of course you wrote the infamous Happy Days episode where Fonzie literally jumps over a shark to like answer to a challenge, and that created the term that we know today as jumping the shark, which is where a show has reached its creative peak and just kind of declines from there. Two questions for you. One, has your feeling about that legacy changed? Maybe you kind of enjoy or find funny the sort of infamy that the episode has gotten, or maybe it's more so you're kind of still defensive about the episode. That's one question. And two, for both of you guys, do you think that Family Matters ever jumped the shark?
Well, we'll answer the first part.
Sure.
Yeah, we did an episode where a talent agent's car breaks down, goes into Arnold, sees Fonzie's magic with the ladies, said, oh my goodness, you can be the next James Dean. And of course, the whole people come out. So the B story, Fonzie's on the beach, and there's this cocky California kid type guy. They have a water skiing race. That's a tie. So we have to come up with a tiebreaker. Well, part of it is Henry Winkler's father always said to Henry, okay, tell me water ski. So he finally did. But that wasn't why we did this. But what's interesting, Lee Margulies, who worked at the LA Times for years in the calendar section, in 2000, maybe 10 years ago, asked me if I wanted to write an article on Jump the Shark. So I did, and it's kind of called In Defense of Jumping the Shark. Because when it first came out, I thought, oh my God, I should wear a scarlet F on my chest. I'm doomed. So I felt like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. And then after Family Matters, after Happy Days and all this stuff, I went to pitch something at Disney. I'm sorry that I'll get to the answer, but the executive was looking at my resume and said, oh, you worked on Happy Days. God, do you have any idea who wrote the Jump the Shark episode? And I said, I never got to pitch the story because she was so excited. Anyway, so I finally got to the point where I'm fine with it.
Your Jeopardy question now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it makes more people want to check out the episode, and maybe they enjoy it even more because this is just, I don't know, this is just something that's just etched in pop culture.
A friend of mine thought it was Jump the Shark meant, oh, it's a really good thing because he loved that episode. And I said,
Seems adventurous, yeah.
Right.
Well, it's funny with Family Matters. Theoretically, you could say we jumped the shark a number of times, but there was a strange compact between the audience and Jaleel. They trusted his character so much that if we said we turn him into Stefan, the ratings went up. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ratings,
Yeah.
it's like the ratings go up. Going, so you would do another character like do Elvis. It's like going, yeah, they just accept this.
Yeah.
They just accept this. And it was just like, that was the strange, and that was like Dave felt it out. He pushed it and realized, oh, I can keep going further. We can keep going further because they're cool with this. So you go, yeah, you could theoretically say jump the shark, but it was, certain episodes, but there was such a trust between the audience and the character.
Yeah.
They wanted us to go there. They want us to go there. I'll tell you a story. I was teaching at the New York Film Academy, and I had a student with me. I was consulting with a student. The student asked me, he says, what shows did you do? And I said, I did Family Matters. His eyes got really wide and goes, oh my God, your show tell me that I could be cool. From being a nerd to being cool. And I was like, and I got to say, my point of view about why I did writing changed after Family Matters because of all the people that say, oh, that was family night for us. This was the only time we were together. Things like this. Jim Swick has heard it. Jim Gagin has heard it. And I was even listening to a little old interview with Gregory Peck. Talking same thing. And then I now go, oh, this isn't about me at all. These are about strangers. I'm writing for strangers. I might start a marriage somehow. I don't know. I might end a marriage somehow. The man I wrote. I don't know. I'll probably never know. But these shows are they affect people's lives.
Absolutely.
And it's like it's literally not. Literally, I think Fred and I's thinking is, what do we have to write to get audience here and make them laugh their asses off?
Yeah.
That's like the principle of one. It's like going, because believe me, I've been in tapings where nobody laughed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, that is like, Fred's grimace is like, that is the scariest thing. Scary idea for a comedy writer is to go to the tape and nobody laughs because it was so bad. So that's where our heads were at. But it's like you realize as you get older, you go, oh, this is pretty heady stuff here. And even though it was made, however many years ago, it's still affecting people's lives because more and more are seeing it. You're going, oh, okay. Now I know I'm on this earth. You go like, oh,
Yeah.
it was for them.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
You've given a lot of millennials like myself joy, so we appreciate you for that. Fred,
you know what, and that's that's the whole point of it.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. The whole point of it is, it's like, yeah, this thing is, we did it right. It brings joy, maybe insight. We did try to do insight. In terms of the relationships and whatnot. But yeah, you don't realize when you're doing it what the bigger result is. Even bigger than for the financial result. It's like, oh yeah. It's like, I don't think anybody ever came to my father and said, oh, that thing you did at G changed my life. That didn't happen.
Right.
But it's happened to us numerous times when the show is mentioned. And it's like, thank God, that's great. But it has affected my writing today. I really make sure that there's something human in the stories, something that of value that someone might get something out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But also there are things I'm going, it's like I heard the story. It was Marlon Brando was so brilliant. He mastered movie acting in probably his 20s and was quite bored with it when he was doing it because he was just so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't until the horrible stuff that happened to his kids.
Yeah.
He went to a movie just to get away. And then he understood what movies were about. That's when he understood what he did for a living, what the meaning of it was. He goes on the other end of it. And yeah, it's potent stuff. It's like that's why, it's funny. Someone said recently, it's some awards thing. And a writer said, maybe we should not be putting villains on a pedestal. Letting the villain be a protagonist. It sends a bad message that could have affected us today.
Right.
And I think that's what they're thinking. Was like going, this dangerous stuff you're playing with. In a Bond movie, the villain is the villain. The villain dies.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
that's it. There's no qualifiers. There's like the villain just goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do. I think that maybe this writer's got a point to make. You're going,
Yeah.
Villains should be just that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, Fred. Did you think that Family Matters jumped the shark? I don't know if we ever got to your part of the question.
Oh, no, I don't think it. I don't think it
Yeah,
did.
it's everything. We didn't have to like grab for something odd that we thought could bring ratings in or something, but it's like
Right.
they were like Carl and Steve are great story generators. You always could find a story for the two of them.
Yeah,
and always would be funny.
I did it. I don't think I ever jumped the shark. There were times where, as Jaleel got older, they might have thought, a little strange, but that was the only ever.
Yeah, that was the only thing as he got older, and it's like he's growing. So it was just like, but it
didn't jump.
But there was a relationship with the audience. I saw a show, cop show called The Rookie. That's done now, and we liked it because it was a very, very realistic police show. Then the showrunner left, and they were jumping the shark all over the place. It was like, I'm going, and my wife's going, I can't take this anymore.
It's too much. Too much shark jumping.
Too much shark. Too much. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Can you both talk about your relationship with Bill Bickley and Mike Warren, who of course created Family Matters? So Fred, if I understand correctly, you met Bill and Mike on Happy Days, and Steve,
Right.
It looks like you got to know him more through Family Matters. Something about Bill's conversation that I had with him the other day, about how he might have taken the show versus how Dave Duclon eventually took the show, kind of stuck with me. I mean, he did seem to think that sort of the sci-fi elements that were happening later on with Urkel and the Time Machine and Stevil and things like that may have not been how he would have taken it. So I don't know if you guys had any relationship, much conversation, much input, any dynamic with Bill and Michael toward how the direction of the show was going to be. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what was your relationship with them?
That's an excellent question. As I mentioned, it was Happy Days' 50th anniversary. Brian Levant and I wrote a book, as I mentioned, called 50 Years of Happy Days. We interviewed the whole cast, obviously, that are with us. And I joined Happy Days the fourth season, as did Brian Levant. And Bill, I'm sure, from the conversation you had with him, Bill was the first producer on Happy Days. And as I'm sure you know, a lot of people think Happy Days came to be because of American Graffiti. Happy Days was shot before.
Yeah, Bill said that, yeah.
Graffiti, turned down, then they showed it on Love American Style. So again, Bill was the first producer. We interviewed the whole cast, and we sat down with Bill, and we had a event at the Gary Marshall Theater, and we had a panel, Bill Bickley, Lowell Gans, and Dave was never involved with, he might have written an episode, but so Bill was the producer the first 2 years, and then as Gary thought it would be, with Jimmy Walker and Dynamite being very popular, Gary Marshall decided not to do one camera anymore and do a three camera stage. So all of a sudden, American Graffiti comes out. I forgot who called Gary and said, hey, we need a show like, the 50s. And Gary said, well, we already have one. So then at audition again, and Anson Williams, they thought they were too old. So when it turned to three camera, Bill didn't have experience in that, but Bill and Michael were great. They'd be on Happy Days, they'd be gone, and then they were my boss and I was their boss. And there was, then on Family Matters, they were always but just great guys to work with. So
yeah, they're great guys, and they weren't with us day to day. They weren't with us day to day. They were there, but they weren't with us day to day on the show. Bill, I got to know better than Michael. It was sort of like, it was sort of funny because sort of like, and honestly, I never actually spoke to Tom Miller the whole time.
Of Miller and Boyette.
Yeah, there was never a time where it was like, "Hi, I'm Steve," and like, no,
Yeah.
it was like I never met him. I've seen him. I've seen the table readings, but then some he wasn't showing up to those anymore. But he just so I never knew that. I never really knew the man.
Right. Well,
Right.
yeah. Back to when so Bill left after the second season. Lowell Gans took over, and just really the energy was great. The cast just loved. I think they really have fond memories of the first two seasons. But what really happened was the energy shoot in front of an audience. They just love that, and
They worked off of that.
everyone had Marion and Tom, Tom Bosley won a Tony Award for Fiorello, on Broadway, obviously. But so everyone had to kind of experience that. Ron Howard had never
He was
performed.
a single camera guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very much.
Ron was so nervous the first episode. I understand it. He was just really, I wouldn't say afraid, but afraid, he'd blow it or something. But Jerry Paris and the cast were just so, behind him. And obviously, as you know, Ron just nailed it. And the energy it brought. And, Jerry was just a great, great director, actor, um, you know, the show where he played the neighbor, and he was an actor in The Wild Ones, The Naked and the Dead, where he played both parts, I think. No, I'm just kidding. So he brought so much energy, and just the cast just loved Friday nights. Just the energy, and Bill and Michael remained, a key part of it, off and on. So it was just working with them all these years. It was just a thrill.
So what were Bill and Michael's roles versus like Miller and Boyette's roles? Like, because I know
Yeah.
Miller and Boyette, they come up in the end credits. Were they just the production company that funded and distributed the show? Like, what were the
Yeah,
differences between the
right.
two
At first it was
duos?
Miller, Milkus, Boyette. Then Gary Court, Mary Marshall, and then Eddie left, and it was Miller, Boyette. And as Steve said, we would see them. They'd be at readings and stuff, but they kind of handled work with the network stuff, especially after Gary went off to do movies and stuff. But the day-to-day stuff was Michael and Bill get notes from them. Dave was a showrunner, and they trusted Dave explicitly. So
I mean, the idea back in the day probably is true today too. But when you create a show, you don't plan on doing it day to day the whole time. You want to
Right.
do three or 4 years and then hand it off to someone else,
Got
and
it.
then basically you're collecting a nice check
Oh yeah.
and try to sell something else. Um, and Bill and Michael were at that point where they'd done a lot of stuff and they needed someone to run the show.
Yep.
And they want someone to run the show so they didn't have to worry about the stuff. They did the heavy lifting of selling the show. They got it on the air.
Right.
Now it's like a going, hey, now we don't have to work these hours. So,
Yeah.
but and that's their prerogative. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
and also, I'm sorry, as you know, they Warner Bros. Wanted to bring it back about ballpark 6 or so months ago. Brian Levant and I had lunch with Bill not too long ago, and they said,
A Family Matters reboot.
a Family Matters reboot.
Yeah. Yeah. We
Bill
wrote
got
about
a
this.
phone call from Warner Brothers basically saying, "Hey, we want your, okay to do this. You won't be a part of it." They gave him some money, and it never happened, but they didn't want anyone involved with Family Matters to do it again.
Is that why it never went anywhere? Because like
I
those
don't
people
know.
were shut out that were important to the original run?
Yeah, so they just didn't want to do it. And then there's been articles, I don't know if Jaleel talked about it, but he doesn't want to do it where like he's older now and has kids. He
Right.
wanted to do I think he probably told you a sitcom about really what happened to him. A guy.
Yeah. He wanted to do it. If you guys ever seen the Big Bang Theory spinoff Young Sheldon, he kind of wanted to do that. Like he wanted to do like a young Jaleel White sort of
Oh,
twist on it. So I don't know. Latest story that I've seen is that Jaleel says he has a reboot cooking. So
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
storms were kind of all over the place as to whether a reboot is actually happening or not.
You know, here's my idea.
Yeah.
You 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 write the show as though it's the 10th season, and you do it all in AI. Actors don't have to deal with each other. They could be in a recording booth and record it and do the whole season. It'll look like, because Justine Bateman, who's quite good at this stuff, she said actually the technology exists to do the 10th season of Family Ties. And
Wow.
and now listen, I was watching a Rambo 6 trailer with Stallone, and I'm going, wait a minute. And I go to IMDb. There's no Rambo 6. There's
Yeah.
no plans for Rambo 6. That was an
Yeah.
AI version of it. It was like, it looked real.
Yeah.
Um,
Speaking of
So
which, I have to ask because I think I've been reading online for God knows how long. I think you guys had stayed with Family Matters through the end, and there was always discussion about how there was thoughts of a season 10 where Steve and Laura got married. Obviously, the show got canceled season 9, with the whole CBS block party disaster that happened with Family Matters and Step by Step. Is any of that true? Was there a season 10 planned where we were going to see the marriage or no?
I don't
no, we were not planning on a season 10. Here's here's something that's probably true, is that they went to CBS because they wanted another season for Step by Step and I think some new shows.
Yeah.
Uh, if they hadn't gone to CBS, there probably would have been a 10th season, I was told.
Really? Why was it taken off of ABC after the 8th season?
Well, no, it stayed on ABC after the 8th season. Oh, because it was a business deal.
Well, the last year was CBS.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
last year was CBS.
basically a business deal. Tom and Bob were trying to get more episodes out of the other shows, and they used sort of Family Matters as the anchor. And so we're getting up to CBS, but it was a disaster,
Yeah.
like you said. But I've heard that ABC would have wanted a 10th season.
Really? Wow.
So again, that
Hey, let's go back. Yeah.
they can't go back in time, but it was like, but that's the scuttlebutt that I heard, because the whole CBS thing, I don't remember we found out about that. But it was like the minute we were on CBS, it was apparent. No one was talking about season 10 after the ratings. No one was talking about it.
What were the ratings specifically? Because I'm sure they would be great by today's standards.
Oh, by today's standards, we'd be on forever.
Yeah, by today's standards. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we went down to 5 million from 9.
Oh.
No, it had it.
For a network, that's pretty bad at the time.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
thought
today
we-
5 million is good.
Yeah.
But
Back then, I could see, yeah, if you weren't pulling double digits, then yeah, you were in trouble.
But
Yeah.
I've noticed that the networks are trying to bring back every name actor from the 90s and 2000 to shows. And I'm not surprised they're talking about the Family Matters reboot.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would do it, but because that's what's going on. They're bleeding viewers, and they are. In fact, what's really interesting is you look at shows today on the networks, and they're more culturally diverse than they were in the 90s.
Yeah.
But it's not out of altruism. It's out of, we got to get more people. We
Right.
got to get more eyeballs.
Right.
So you
And we'll
see
do
more
whatever it
black
takes.
people. So like you're seeing a lot of different races on these shows. You're going, that's no mistake. This is
Yeah.
this is on purpose. Like you go to the show Elspeth, the boss is black, her partner's black. It's like going, this is not, they're just going, we got to get everybody watching. We can't, because when it came to the year 2000, Madison Avenue said, oh, we don't need older viewers. And they canceled Matlock. They canceled these shows that were working. And now you're going, you gave away a lot.
Yeah.
And now they want it back.
Right.
I think right now the top show is Tracker.
Yeah.
On CBS.
Yeah, with Justin Hartley. Yep.
Justin Hartley's like, that's the show's about 18 million viewers, a lot of viewers.
I know.
Yeah.
But, the thing is, you look at the show, it's like, it's cool detective show. You can't stay ahead of it. There's nothing that would piss off any group.
Yeah.
It's like you're going, he just has to find the person. That's it.
Yeah. Very simple.
And very simple, but complicated in finding him. And you go like, that's doing really well. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised in the future if you start seeing more shows. I want to say of that ilk, but of that thought process. I'm going simple, clean writing, and the thing is, it's funny. It's like, I don't know. I'm spoiled for sitcoms because of I did it. So when I see someone doing it poorly, it just is like, oh, I can't watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just like, I don't know about you, Fred, but I'm like, I go, there's something called George and Martha's First
Right.
Wedding or whatever, and we watched like 7 minutes. And went, oh my god!
Well, yeah, it's interesting because we made our living writing sitcoms, and I don't really watch too many.
No, they
Yeah,
only
there's not a
want
lot of them on TV,
no.
actually.
And here's the thing: is that they want more sitcoms because they're cheaper to make. I fear they may have broken. See, the thing was that here's how it works: Gary Marshall hires Dave Duclaw, mentors him, right? Dave Duclaw hires me, mentors me, right? And then after me, they broke the chain. And so I don't know how many people know how to do this. I don't know because
Yeah.
you're going. This was all based upon, you know, writers from the '50s teaching writers in the '60s and the '70s and da 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 on and on and
Just
on. But that was broken. The only funny show on right now is St. Dennis Medical. To me,
yeah.
that's a funny show.
Right. Wow.
That's
Well,
Justin Spitzer. That's quite funny. But I'm like, I watched another new one recently. I'm like, going, no. Well, there's one show. It's a show called Mid-Century Modern, and I was curious because we watch Modern Family every night before we go to bed. Laugh before you go to bed, healthiest thing. So we watch Modern Family, and Mitch and Cam are, of course, a big component of it, and they're hilarious. And the worlds they go into, and this is like going, it's great. And that's my expectation. And then I watch my Mid-Century Modern. I'm like going, yeah, these guys did it better. I mean, it did it better. It's like I'm going, they're not making me laugh the way these guys did. But I mean, it's Christopher Lloyd and Steve Levitan just did. It's. I look at it now. It's. I don't know how they did it. The physical comedy, I don't know how they did it. And listen, we did it. We did some great physical comedy.
Yeah.
But they were doing stuff on a level that I've never seen before, and I've never seen again.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just like it is. It is sad though. It's sad that the sitcom. It's like you're going. It brings people joy, and it's like, and also made people a lot of money.
Yes.
And they ran away from it. I'm like, going, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very
So
sad.
now they're in trouble. The whole reality business is like in a depression, from my understanding, because they went this reality way, and I'm going, that's not a long term. That's not a good solid long term business plan. Because when the advertising dollars go down, which they have, you got this thing that's not making much money, and the resale of it probably isn't that great either.
Right. I mean, Netflix seems to be doing very well with reality television shows, so that there might be an exception to the rule there.
Oh, sure, there's going to be stuff that does well, but it's not the same.
Right.
Post strike, it's not the same.
Oh yeah.
They're
Absolutely.
they're looking, how do we cut our debt loads? How do we make these shows cheaper? I mean, you look at the show The Pit on Max, and you can see what they're doing. You go like, okay, they got Noah Wiley in the lead, and I guarantee you, every other actor who I've never heard before is probably getting the base pay.
Yeah.
It's one guy making a lot of money, and everyone else probably just getting the base pay.
Yeah.
They'll go up, but I'm going, these are all new people. They're all new people. These are people I haven't seen. One guy who's in it, he had one credit before the show.
Wow.
And so there's so many
Go ahead,
articles
Fred.
in the LA Times. They're just devastating how many people can't make a living anymore. That they're leaving California. We
Yeah.
were so lucky to do it when we did it. Now Logan's son is a writer. They'll bring in some writers for a month or two. They'll break the stories. They're gone. I mean, we would shoot 24 episodes. Just had months of work, and now it's so difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, every aspect.
Part of the strike was that we had an unwritten compact, which was, there's a couple staff writers, a few story editors, so many producers, so many executive producers, but it was about anywhere from 8 to 10 people. And basically the system started messing with that. And that's part of the reason why there was a strike, because they had to put in writing what had been true for the last 20 odd years. Because the writing staff, back in the '60s, the writing staff there was like a producer, maybe a story editor, and everything else was freelance. As the '70s came upon, gradually the writing staff got bigger and bigger and bigger. Sometimes writing staffs got to be ridiculous sized, like Roseanne had 20 people.
Wow.
It's like, it's like 20. They could do it 20 people.
Right.
It's ridiculous. But some of the shows had big staff like that. But now with the studios going, I think Fred probably saw this. The Writers Guild sent us a report that TV writing jobs have gone down by 37%.
Yeah.
But that makes sense in the sense that there were 600 shows on the air. Now that's somewhere between 500 and 450. You know, take an average of 10 writers, hey, it adds up to 1,000 something. You know, it's like you're going. It's like they're contracting. It's
But that's
contracting.
where there's 10 writers. There's a lot less.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
now they've put it into, it's like you cannot have less than like 8 or 7 or 8 now. Now
Jeez.
it's like you have to have this position filled. You can't, you know. So they basically took what we did, which happened naturally, and made it the law. You know, because they're just like, there's people that just try to disrupt, and they try to disrupt, and the disruption isn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
You know, I mean, you could argue the Netflix disruption probably wasn't a good thing with the business. You know, because it's a company and a stock that doesn't make sense. And so what the studios did was they tried to copy something that doesn't make sense, because it's what they always done. They did it with sound, they did it in TV, they always just DVDs. They all go, when someone finds something, they all go that way. Except if you all go that way, you get up with a giant debt load, and they have a lot of them giant debt loads.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's
God.
really, it's like, you know, it's really, it's you know, there's that new TV show called The Studio on Apple,
Yep.
and he's getting down the nitty gritty of what's wrong, because we're like, you know, this is not. And when I started out working at Universal, and there was a guy named Lou Wasserman. Lou Wasserman was the town. If there was going to be a strike, he'd fix it. If there needed to be a strike, he'd let it happen. This guy was the guy. He said, what Lou says goes.
Yep.
Well, there's no Lou Wasserman in that. There's no CEO who speaks for the town.
Yep.
And it's like, in the end of the strike, 3 of the CEOs had to basically do the negotiation together, because basically it's the first time on a negotiation. I don't know about you, Fred, but that's the first time I ever saw this get everything we wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything we wanted, because they knew. One studio said to them, writers and actors, we have to do this or we're going under. I don't know what studio it was, but they were like, we're going under. Because it's like, what they were doing stuff that was like, this is an example of when I did the Pavarotti movies in Boston. There's a DGA negotiation coming up, but we were told if there's a strike, we're just going to film the opera, the whole thing, and sell it as a documentary. So they had a plan of, oh, you know, there's a risk here. When they didn't plan that way last year. I mean, whenever this thing happened, it was like Deadpool was the middle filming. Like, why in the world would you start filming Deadpool when you know there's a potential lockout? But see, the thing is, these sets stay up, and they got to pay rent for months and months and carry all this stuff over. So it's going, this isn't very professional what's going on here.
Right.
I just thought that's so overwhelming. This is just like, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
This is really, there's a lot going on, and it's like going, whoa, you know?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the insight that you guys have given, both on your experience with Family Matters and all the other experiences that you've had in the business. Can you let us know how we can keep in touch with you via a website or social media, how we can keep up with what you're doing?
Oh, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on X.
Yeah. What's your handle? How can we find you?
S Langford Scare.
Okay. And you, Fred?
See, I'm only on Instagram. I think it's Freddie, FREDDY, Junior. I'm not a big social guy. I mean,
that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, Instagram is how we connected. So, yeah. But thank you, Fred Fox and Steven Langford. I mean, I appreciate you guys giving your experience on the business.
I'm sorry we held you so long.
No. I mean, this was great. I mean, I wanted to get a nice, full, in-depth conversation about what you guys been through, and this was great. So, yeah, I appreciate you a lot for doing this. I know it's a little bit earlier in California. There, are you still in California, Steve? You are.
Yep, I'm in Tarzana.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely talk with for more hours and ask you more questions. But
okay, sure.
Time is of the essence. But
best to Andrew.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll tell him you guys said hi. Thank you so much.
Very good.
Yeah, but yeah,
right.
Thank you so much. Take care and have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.